Our hero, a legendary blacksmith, harbors a desire in his heart that makes him shine brighter than gold, to forge the perfect weapon capable of changing his destiny in a world filled with warriors and wizards where every strike and spell can define the future. The battle is not just with the blade, but with dreams themselves. The hierarchy of guilds is cruel and relentless, dominated by powerful families that play dirty to maintain their influence. Becoming a renowned blacksmith is his life goal, but for that, he will need to challenge not only the techniques of forging, but also the greatest titans the game has ever seen. And when the chance to start this challenge arises, more than his skill with the hammer, his heart will be tested. His determination is ready for what lies ahead. The journey will begin with a crazy event that promises everything or nothing, and those who are prepared for the confrontation will become the legend the world is waiting for. Raw courage will come into play, but as always, nothing is easy. Oh, and the virtual gaming community is waiting for him. In 2045, Quran Corporation launched a revolution with its hyper-realistic virtual game, Ares, under the command of genius Lysigian. The game exploded in no time, reaching the incredible mark of 1 billion users. Like a true phenomenon. To spice up the gameplay, they introduced an event where players had to break a wooden doll in just 10 strikes to win a valuable game. Capsule worth 50 million, and also 5 bonus points on their stats for an entire year. But guess what? Since the game was launched, no one, absolutely no one, had managed to complete this crazy mission. The support center was already in panic, with the attendants shaking in their boots, wondering about the complaints that would come from frustrated players. Just when a relations officer was about to throw everything away and quit, an unknown player appeared. Yes, our protagonist, Kim Hyun-soo, ready to take on the challenge. The crowd ignored the guy until he pulled out his sword and, in the calmest manner, delivered a strike that cleanly sliced the wooden doll in half. The shock was universal. He was the first to manage to complete the event, and the reaction was completely surreal. Immediately, the team leader ordered a background check on the crazy guy and discovered that the sword he used was an epic weapon, like, really awesome. This only increased their curiosity. After all, how did this guy take down a doll with such a powerful weapon? But before all that, our protagonist, Kim Hyun-soo, had woken up from a haunting nightmare where he saw his father burning and couldn't save him. He meets his friend Kim Jae-hoon in the hospital lobby, and the scene promises a lot of conversation. Hyun-soo was so incognito that he wore a hat and a face mask, almost like a disguised superhero. Jae-rum, that jokester friend, doesn't waste any time and starts teasing, saying he looks beautiful like an angry catfish. Hyun-soo takes off the mask, revealing the burn scar, and the vibe of the conversation shifts completely because of it. Jae-rum quickly moves to the serious part and suggests they talk about the subject that really matters. Then comes the million-dollar question. Does Rihun know about the game Arius? And the kid, completely lost in space, has no idea. At that point, Jae-rum gives a quick summary of the game, until he drops the bombshell. There's an event just for beginners. He said that up until today, no one has managed to complete this event, not even the most hyped players around. Jae-rum warns Rihun about the reward for completing the event and even suggests they give it a shot. Rihun is like shocked, thinking how could we even try if millions have already failed? Jae-rum admits the mission is complicated, but believes it's not impossible. He's not that optimistic, but he believes that with the willpower of our protagonist, they have a real chance of success. But the guy is still burning neurons, and then Jae-rum takes him to the capsule of 10. On the way, Rihun keeps asking if everything is okay with this crazy adventure, and then he realizes that this capsule was bought by Jae-rum to try it. The game cost 10 million, and he's shocked, like, are you telling me you spent 10 million on a game capsule? What the hell, man? Wow. He can't believe how expensive it is, especially with 1 billion people playing. Jae-rum defends his investment, saying that if everything goes right, he will win amazing prizes, like the real jackpot. Apparently, even real-world coins are being traded inside the game, which attracts a lot of people. And then, Jae-rum was already out of patience and told him, come on, get in that capsule and let's play already. The protagonist Hyun-soo doesn't show as much excitement as his friend Jae-rum and questions where he got that capsule from. Jae-rum, all excited, replies that it's not about where the capsule came from, but rather focusing on the amazing rewards they can achieve with it. On the other hand, Rihun remains a certified skeptic, stressing that there's no guarantee they will win anything in this crazy game. The kid starts to wonder what's happening with Jae-rum, who insists it's an investment, reminding Rihun that they have a real chance here. Rihun is still confused. He has no idea what Jae-rum is talking about until he explains that in the game Aris, there is the famous blacksmith class. Jium believes this is an incredible opportunity for Ryunso, as he is the only son of a world-renowned blacksmith. Finally, it clicks for Ryunso, and he begins to understand what his friend has been trying to express from the beginning. Our hero then removes his cap, revealing the condition of his head after the severe accident he suffered. There were deep burns with scars that ran across his head. As he tells Jium that he is not in a condition to try anything, it turns out that his father had an unfortunate accident with fire in the workshop, and when Ryunso tried to save him, he ended up getting burned as well. Despite being able to save his father, he never regained consciousness, leaving Ryunso devastated. To cope with the medical expenses, the protagonist was forced to perform relentless manual labor. On a regular workday, his supervisor told him to use the hammer to drive in a nail, something he had always done masterfully. However, on that day, he noticed that he couldn't use the hammer as he used to, almost as if his skills had disappeared. He couldn't apply force with his right arm, and this made him feel unfit to perform any task related to the blacksmith's trade. Ryunso tried to warn his friend that he was only trying to help, but assured him he would be fine. In a serious gesture, Ryunso turns to leave, asking Jium to return the game capsule, instead of throwing it away. 10 million won. Just as he was about to open the door, Jium interrupts him, calling him a real idiot. In a burst of frustration, he reminds Ryunso that he is fighting hard just to pay his father's medical bills, and that the jobs he was doing were not sustainable. To complicate matters further, Jium informs him that the game could be exactly what he needs to cover all the treatments and make him whole again. Jium tries to use reverse psychology, stating that he has never been the type to give up easily. Jium warns him that he will pay for the capsule, and all he wants is for Ryunso to just listen. He presses Ryunso to give it a single chance, following the line that he can quit if he doesn't like what he is going to see. However, Ryunso refuses to respond and simply leaves, determined to follow his own path. While working, the protagonist cannot get Jium's words out of his head, which echo insistently in his thoughts. He tries to ignore these thoughts, because he needs to focus on earning money. For his father's treatment, in this unexpected moment, he hears the sound of clashing metals, which fills him with an immense longing for what he is missing. This feeling sharpens his curiosity, and he decides to take a look at the game. He heads to the game capsule. His desire to reclaim what he lost transforms into an impulse to step inside the capsule. He finds himself in the character creation space, and when prompted to choose his nickname, he opts for his usual name. Then, the system begins to generate his character according to Hyunsu's physical type. Hyunsu is utterly astonished to realize that this incredible character is being created without a single flaw. It seems to have come out of a fairy tale. After shaping what appears to be the perfect character, with flawless skin and everything else, he is asked if he really wants to proceed with it. Without a second thought, he quickly and decisively replies yes, as if he knows this is the chance of his lifetime. Ryunsu can hardly believe that the strength in his right hand has returned, and a shy smile emerges on his face, as if he were rediscovering a lost part of himself. He feels obligated to repay Jirum and decides that he will do whatever it takes to honor this help. Soon, the game places him in a completely unknown area, which is the Barden territory, right at the starting zone, where everything starts to happen. As he walks through this territory, he soon encounters the king's famous blacksmith, who seems to draw him in with an inexplicable magnetism. Inside the workshop, the blacksmith is dedicated to forging a sword, hammering the metal with impressive intensity until Ryunsu appears. He then, without mincing words, tells the blacksmith that he is doing everything wrong. The blacksmith is so shocked that he almost drops the hammer. Ryunsu repeats, deciding that it is better to be straightforward and inform the blacksmith that he is indeed making it the wrong way. He realizes the blacksmith is trying to create a strong sword, but assures him that this method will never result in anything good. The blacksmith, still somewhat bewildered by Ryunsu's boldness, listens to the boy saying that he just wants to help, so that he doesn't end up creating a real piece of junk. The blacksmith's irritation grows upon hearing a nobody like Ryunsu give him advice about his own work. In an act of provocation, he hands the hammer to Ryunsu, challenging him to try forging the sword on his own. And to make it clear, the blacksmith warns that he will only observe, taking the role of a project inspector. It seems that initially, Ryunsu was just trying to win the blacksmith's favor to use his forge, but now, with this challenge, he thinks the situation has gotten even better. As soon as one person informs the blacksmith that he is going to forge the sword, he makes it clear that he has a very specific condition. Intrigued, the blacksmith asks what the condition is, and Rinso reveals that he will keep the sword forged in exchange for this madness. Rinso promises to help the blacksmith understand how to proceed with the process. The blacksmith, in a state of disbelief, cannot believe how confident Rinso is and accepts the condition, but does not miss the opportunity to warn that if Rinso does not succeed in forging a good sword, there will always be consequences. Without a second thought, Ryosul nods in agreement, as if affirming a sacred pact. As he approaches the forge, at the moment he prepares to start hammering the metal, Ryosul realizes that it has been 3 years since he worked on anything like this, but believes that he still has the necessary experience buried within him, which will allow him to make it happen. Ryosul lifts his hammer and begins to pound the metal. With every strike, his senses, which had been dormant, begin to awaken as if they are being reborn. Now, Ryosul feels truly alive again, a sensation he hasn't experienced in a long time. With all the excitement in the world, he continues to hammer the metal in a nearly euphoric state. Meanwhile, the blacksmith watches from a distance, still skeptical, unable to believe that Rinso can truly do this just because he is, until now, a complete outsider. However, his perspective begins to change when he sees how Rinso moves. He clearly has done something like this before. Though the blacksmith still does not believe Ryosul has the skill of a professional, he soon notices that the boy is smiling, as if he is enjoying every second of the process. Yet the blacksmith remains reluctant, not believing that this means anything in terms of results. Before long, the blacksmith starts to convince himself that he might have wasted a lot of time. Suddenly, Rinso appears with a professional move, as if it were a master's dance, involving bending, reattaching, and then refining the steel. The process is so simple that it suppresses any impurity, and the blacksmith is shocked to realize that he had never thought of it this way. Even so, the blacksmith still does not want to believe that Ryosul is doing so well. So, he tries to use his assessment skills, and of course, he is completely astounded when he realizes that the grade of the steel has jumped from D to C. The blacksmith almost loses his mind at this. He can't believe it. He knows he has forged C-grade steel before, but he has never seen such a leap in such a short time. It's surreal. Finally, he begins to come to terms with it. Who would have thought that Ryan-Soo might not be bluffing when he says he's talented, but still, he believes he has reached his limit. Because come on, how could he surpass what he just saw? He convinces himself that there's no way Ryan-Soo could be better than him. The art of metallurgy. The blacksmith continues to watch until he eventually falls asleep. Poor guy. When he wakes up, dawn is breaking, and to his surprise, Rin-Soo is still at the forge. He sees Rin-Soo hammering the steel non-stop, using the same method all night long. And when he uses his appraisal skill, the blacksmith is incredulous to see that the grade has now been classified as B. My God. The blacksmith can't believe that Rin-Soo managed to reach grade B with what he's seeing. Rin-Soo isn't even thinking about stopping anytime soon. That kid is a locomotive. Then momentarily, Rin-Soo looks tired, and just as he's about to let the sword slip, the blacksmith pulls it back, asking what he needs to do next because he's ready to follow his orders. Hyun-Soo smiles at the blacksmith's willingness, thanking him with a gleam in his eyes. The two then start to work together on the sword, a true team. The blacksmith opens his notebook and begins jotting down various instructions, like a true academic. In no time, Hyun-Soo gives a little push and raises the steel to an even higher grade. The blacksmith, unwillingly, has to admit that Hyun-Soo is incredible. He has never seen a rare grade item coming from beginners before, and it looks like Hyun-Soo is going to forge a unique sword, worthy of a true hero. While the blacksmith is there, happy and excited, Ryan-Soo suddenly slams the brakes, saying it's not time to celebrate yet. The blacksmith is shocked, and Ryan-Soo quickly points out that the sword's grip still needs work, and the blade needs more sharpening. The blacksmith looks like a total novice when Ryan-Soo says that the blade hasn't yet reached the peak of sharpening. The blacksmith then reveals that he has never met anyone like Ryan-Soo before. He has been hammering since he was a child, sharing a bit of his story. As Ryan-Soo is considering bringing along a sword, the blacksmith suggests he forge another one. This time, the blacksmith presents an extraordinarily rare material, mithril, which seems like something from an RPG. He explains that the mithril is a family heirloom, passed down through generations, and Ryan-Soo is like, "But why would you give me this?" The blacksmith, full of interest and enthusiasm, confesses that he has learned a lot from our boy Hyun-Soo and is totally eager to absorb even more knowledge about forging. Moreover, the blacksmith, feeling quite confident, reveals that he lacks the skill necessary to forge the mithril and is eagerly looking forward to seeing what kind of blade our protagonist will create. He's going to create with that rare material. The blacksmith suddenly realizes the responsibility and expresses that he feels the urgent need to protect. and a single one, as if he were forging a mentor-disciple bond. And one soul, in turn, is astonished because mithril, that legendary material, only exists in stories. And now he's having the incredible chance to work with something so magical. And even though he's never touched mithril before, our hero is ready to risk everything. He discovered that he will leave the forge, somewhat throwing himself into the unknown because of this new opportunity. Ryo-sul comments that he will have to start his work from scratch, a true marathon of effort. The blacksmith, happy as can be, automatically asks if he can join the boy in crafting the sword. It's like a dream coming true. Ryo-sul, moved by a feeling of gratitude, accepts the offer since the blacksmith gave him something extremely rare and valuable. But the blacksmith doesn't stop there and even asks to call Rinso master. Rinso, believing he will please the handsome fellow, but then without thinking twice refuses the offer, as the blacksmith seems to have lived an eternity longer than he has. Thus, the two join together and they begin to work on the material. A month later, Yoon-soo becomes the pride of the blacksmith, finishing the blade he always desired. After this whole process, he ends up completing the event. That was all the Game Management Center's team managed to collect about our friend Yoon-soo. Apparently, they are left knowing nothing more about the boy because he insisted on maintaining a low profile, avoiding all the attention from the crowd, like paparazzi. Meanwhile, the team continues to monitor Rinso's steps and soon discovers that he entered the hunting training grounds. At the entrance, the instructor, quite worried, tries to convince Rinso not to enter, arguing that he is not strong enough yet and should, hunt a rabbit first. But Rinso, very determined, insists that he wants to stay there, assuring the instructor that he is not going to waste his time with frivolities. Instructor Welson eventually tells him to choose a sword, but Ryo-sul, with coolness and determination, informs him that he brought his own sword, and it is with that one he intends to fight. Only that, apparently, Ryo-sul has been stuck in the beginner zone for a month, and now comes talking about wanting to evolve. Just to acquire some skills, he managed to get the only epic grade sword from the beginner zone, yet he is still stuck at level 1. When the game creator finds out about this, he recommends leaving Ryo-sul alone. Just to see how far he can go in the marathon, the instructor of the hunting grounds doesn't believe that a level 1 guy isn't insisting on using his own sword. It seems like something out of a movie, and to make matters worse, the instructor mocks Ryo-sul for wanting to become a blacksmith in the game, and even reveals that the hunting grounds are incredibly dangerous, with monsters everywhere. He emphasizes that a trained swordsman is undoubtedly much more efficient than a guy with bad equipment. The student's sympathy for Ryo-sul quickly fades, making it clear that he starts to hate the kid. As if that weren't enough, Ryo-sul, not surprised by this since he's received the same treatment in real life, views the situation as normal. Then, the protagonist tells Welson that he wants to be subjected to the hardest course in the hunting grounds because he is trying to surpass the best swordsmen who have ever been there. This leaves Welson flustered, and he decides that he needs to teach Ryo-sul a lesson by putting him to the test. Welson tells Ryo-sul to follow him, saying he will give him a special test that can be faced. Welson takes the boy to the goblin cell and asks him if he's really sure he wants to face the test. And Ryo-sul, all firm, replies that yes, angrily. Welson warns Ryo-sul that if he fails the test, he won't be able to set foot in the hunting grounds for a week, leaving the tension in the air. However, Ryo-sul, our provoking protagonist, can't help himself and asks if the third phase is all that's available. He's got a wild plan in mind. Complete all the phases at once. What audacity, huh? The instructor nearly explodes with rage at Ryo-sul's provocations, visibly irritated by every word that comes out of his mouth. Without hesitation, the instructor opens the cell of the fourth phase, revealing a crazed level 15 goblin, a real terror machine. It's said that a very small number of people dare to go beyond the third phase, and so far, no one, absolutely no one, has passed through the fourth phase. It's sheer desperation. Then, our hero Ryo-sul finds himself face to face with seemingly terrifying goblins, ready to ruin the party. But he, as steady as a rock, remains calm as the goblins charge towards him. The guy is tough. He aims his weapon perfectly, all while waiting for the pesky goblin that's jumping toward him. With a single deadly strike, Ryo-sul takes down the goblin, fully confident that there is no weapon in this world that can defeat his sword. He even manages to knock down one of the agile goblins, but then bam! The other goblin lands a critical hit to Ryo-sul's stomach. Faced with the pain, Ryo-sul drops to his knees as if he had been punched by Mike Tyson, and the instructor, with a mischievous smile, is already ready to use the famous phrase, "I told you so." But, to everyone's surprise, Ryosul manages to endure the blow and the ensuing pain. Tough guy, he has apparently developed monstrous resistance and stamina over the past month he has been forging his sword. Intense weight training and all that. His agility is still a weak point, as he hasn't had the chance to work on it. He needs to adjust his performance while trying to deal with the pain from the blow. The crazed goblin comes charging at him like in a horror movie. The goblin, looking absolutely terrifying, brandishing his weapon, is about to deliver his final attack against Hyunsu. And as if things couldn't get any worse, Hyunsu is hit by a status effect that causes dizziness and a reduction in vision. The instructor, astonished, is impressed by Hyunsu's ability to endure all of this up to that moment, but he still believes the worst is yet to come. Now, Ronsu is faced with two goblins, a situation that would send anyone into a panic. Instead of despairing, however, Ronsu focuses all his confidence on the weapon he crafted himself. It's pure determination. Focusing on all his senses, he waits for the right moment, and, as soon as the goblins close in, he charges into the attack, cutting them down. This leaves all the spectators in total disbelief, including the creator, the D, management team, and, of course, the instructor. What an epic scene. The instructor, filled with admiration, smiles, realizing that there is something special about Ryosul. His mood finally lightens when he realizes that Ryosul possesses abilities that no one else has. Helson, thinking out loud, even suggests that Ryosul learned swordsmanship somewhere, but Ryosul merely mentions that he was taught that a blacksmith should be able to wield the weapons he creates. At that moment, Relson finally recognizes the true blacksmith that Ryosul is. Contemplating the wounds and scars on his arms, he understands that Ryosul is not someone to be trifled with. With no other recourse, Relson apologizes for his previous behavior, and his affinity with Ryosul reaches its peak. At this moment, Relson, with no shame at all, makes a crazy proposal by asking if Ryosul would be willing to become the Mad Lord. This is a legendary class, and when the management team hears this, they nearly collapse. Just imagine the pressure. They can barely believe that Ryosul just receiving an offer from a class that even surpasses the era of the Mad Knight is of course something positive, but once the decision is made, there's no going back. The expectations are sky high. Basically, the Mad Lord is a glorious being, a true giant leading hundreds of Mad Knights. He is seen as the guardian of the game world, the kind of figure that everyone respects and who brings safety to all players. Helson is there, all anxious, counting the seconds for Ryosul's response. It was an offer that could change everything, but to everyone's surprise, Ryosul declines, stating that he is a blacksmith and definitely not a knight. Those watching this scene from the sidelines can't contain their smiles upon hearing Ryosul's response, and even the instructor, who was attentively watching, seems quite pleased with the boy's determination. Meanwhile, Ryosul is wondering if his life as a blacksmith has come to an end, but the game, that thing changed everything for him. No, he was not willing to abandon his life as a blacksmith, quite the opposite. At that moment, an instructor hands him a letter of recommendation and tells him to hurry to the Lord's castle because someone of high importance is waiting for him there. And as a reward for having completed the 4th stage, Helson gifts him an old, rusty armor that once belonged to the former Mad Lord. Although the armor is worn out and nearly discarded, Welson has faith that Ryosul will be able to breathe new life into that armor and pull it out of the hole. The guy is rooting for Ryosul like a true friend, encouraging him to move forward and face other impossible challenges, because in his view, Ryosul is the only one who can do it. The management team is celebrating, relieved that Ryosul managed to escape from that situation that could have cost him his potential forever and even more, a legendary class called God of Blacksmiths. And that is the highest level a blacksmith can achieve. The team is thrilled that Ryosul is still on the path leading to that unparalleled position. After a thorough review of the training field, finally, Ryosul is sent to the village, where he will begin his true journey in the game. But before he reaches the main part of the game, he decides to log out because he also has a bunch of problems to solve in real life. So there he is, relieved that he's already adapting to the game, but at the same time noticing that his bank balance is looking pretty sad. No? He quickly realizes that he needs to cover the hospital bills for his father and, of course, his daily expenses as well. Receives a call from Rinso asking if he managed to finish the training camp. Since he has been so busy with work, he hasn't had time to even play. Rinso replies that yes, he has just received a new mission, in addition to having already arrived in the village of the Rum territory. He feels all happy to hear this and suggests that Rinso drop by the auction house. This place is amazing, as it is where essential items like equipment and various things are sold for gold. And to give you an idea, gold is worth 10,000. In other words, it's an item that anyone wants, and because of that, people are treating it like a job. Rum reveals that this was actually the plan he had when he called Rinso to the game. He admits that since he started playing, he has never seen swords as incredible as the ones Rinso and his father make, and he is excited that Rinso has finally joined him. Now they can easily start selling the coolest swords on the market. Rinso feels a wave of gratitude for what his friend has done and thanks him. Thanks, man. Soon after, Rinso sits down and devours an absurd amount of food because he will need all his stamina to craft several items and sell them for a lot of gold. After that, he runs out and reveals his total determination to make his father wake up again. Later, Rinso returns to the game, connects to the auction house, and is prompted to enter a name for the store and list his items there. Our boy, all excited, names his store River Forge. The system confirms that he now has what he needs to access the auction board anytime and anywhere, and that's quite an achievement. Besides his current sword, Morning Light, our protagonist has only a test sword that he forged himself in his humble forge. While checking out other available test swords, he notices that all are being sold for at least 70 gold coins. Wow. He wants to create materials of the same level as his own sword, and his friend gave him a tip saying not to be stingy when valuing it. Our hero decides to set a price of 100 gold coins. Then, with courage at the tip of his sword, Rinso puts his creation on the market and waits anxiously for the best. He gives the sword a stylish name, First Sword of the River. Soon, players looking for a sword receive a ping in the notification. It's not that people are shocked by the fact that Rinso made the sword from scratch, since he hadn't received one. The offers start to increase, which is crazy, like the hype wave in the Golden Dark Guild. They have already discovered the sword, and the news is still rolling. An enhancement option, but the vice master of the guild isn't easily impressed, stating that the enhancement fees are quite high. He believes that those using lower-level materials are just trolling and cost-cutting, using materials from the same category. On the other hand, the vice master eventually recognizes that the boy played well by naming the sword First Sword. Thus, they realize that their rankings will give that boost if they are the first to purchase this relic from Hyunsu. Without a second thought, one of the Blonde Guild members springs into action and buys the sword as if there were no tomorrow. Meanwhile, Hyunsu is there, all nervous, worried if the sword will sell. Then, he receives the notification that his sword has been purchased. He is in shock upon seeing this, and, when he checks the records, the adventurers can hardly believe that his sword was sold for over 1,000 gold coins. That's right, what you read. Hyunsu goes into a frenzy because 1,000 gold coins basically means 1,000,001 in the real world. Imagine all that money. Grinning like a baby, realizing that it's finally time to hit the jackpot, he curiously checks who the lucky buyer of the sword is and discovers it's the Golden Shield Guild. Soon, Hyunsu receives a message from Blanc saying he's from the Golden Shield Guild, and it all starts to form. Blanc sends the word that he is free to go anytime, because they are keeping an eye out for talents like his. Basically, the guild is offering an exclusive sales contract or, if he prefers, a subscription to the guild. He introduces himself as a top blacksmith guild with over 780,000 followers. Look at the number of people in that guild. Manojiru once remarked that gaining followers is harder than leveling up, because the more players in the guild, the more cash in the bank. Hyunsu glances at the followers of his forge and sees that he has only 82, but continues to receive various guild requests. In short, blacksmiths are more essential in the game than in real life, you know? Because the game needs competent blacksmiths to help create weapons, equipment, and all kinds of items. Even with all these amazing offers, Hyunsu doesn't think it's the right time to join a guild yet. He prefers to keep to himself, letting things flow. This is all because our protagonist hasn't even shown half of what he can do, and, to progress even further, he decides to head to the Lord's mansion. Meanwhile, Lord Barn is there trying to restore a super important item, and one of his subjects informs him that they will only find a restorer. Trained back in the capital, and not without reason, since the restorers are a very proud group, and they have no interest in traveling all the way to Barn. Lord knows this too, but he is not at all inclined to leave the region and head to the capital. How crazy is it that the item he is trying to restore is a bow that holds immense importance? It was left by his father. Here's the twist. The guy Bell, who is talking to Lord, is actually a thief player disguised as a blacksmith. He has been trying to gain Barnes's trust for over a week, and guess what? It's finally starting to work. He comes in all confident and tells Barnes that he wants to help take the bow to the capital to restore it to its perfect form. But then, in the middle of the conversation, Ryo Sul enters the room and completely ruins his strategy by saying that the bow can be restored right there in the territory. Barnes is kind of shocked by this and informs Ryo Sul that the bow is already burned and seriously damaged. Curious to find out who this Ryo Sul is, Barnes asks his guards about him. The guards reveal that Rinso arrived with a letter of recommendation from Helson, which is at least intriguing. Barnes is astonished to hear that Helson, that's right, the great Helson recommended someone to him. Immediately, his interest grows, and he tells Rinso that he needs to hear about his experiences and skills. Modestly, Ryosul replies that he is still a level 1 player, and for his class, he is actually unemployed. Bell, who doesn't care at all, interrupts the conversation and asserts that Ryosul is nothing more than trash. He thinks he's all-powerful and yells that the restoration skill can only be learned by a level 80 blacksmith. Not satisfied, Bell continues to yell at Ryosul, telling him not to interfere in the business he has already organized. Then, finally, Ryosul decides to speak up and tells Bell that he is completely wrong about the type of bow we are dealing with here. Ri explains that the bow is made of horn and not the common recurve bow. Mel becomes completely confused by this, and Ryosul takes the opportunity to tell Lord that he already knows the story of the bow. Apparently, the bow was given to Barnes's father by a wanderer and was a rarity that no one had seen before. Before Ryosul can continue with his explanation, Barnes cuts off the discussion, saying he is not in the mood for wanderers giving him a lesson about his heirloom. Ryosul does not let it slide and points out that yes, the bow may have been gifted by a wanderer, but it was crafted in their own territory. Kansu mentions that she saw a drawing of a buffalo on the wall while entering the hall, and in her world, buffalo horns are special material. He realizes that something is strange with the bow. Instead of the usual cow tendon, it is using a whale line. Ryosul then asks the Lord if he can explain why. The Lord confirms that he can, and reveals that the outsider was a friend of his father and also the blacksmith. It seems that the image Ryosul saw was a representation of a buffalo migration. Isn't that amazing? And to top it off, buffalo and whale lines are both rare resources from the territory, found in swamps. Porto Barnes states that the blacksmith made the bow with the rarest materials the territory has to offer, which is really impressive. Barnes is completely stunned to realize that Rinso, our guy, can notice something that a level 100 blacksmith didn't even realize. How crazy is that, right? At this point, Bell, who is like totally losing his mind, becomes furious because the Lord starts praising Rinso. It's such an affront. The Lord, in his usual manner, mentions that he didn't want the legacy to be lost and that he's been looking for someone who is truly competent to carry it on. Due to the way our hero handled the situation, the Lord decides to give the task of restoring the bow to Ryosul. Look at that, man. What an opportunity. And to make things even more interesting, he's going to receive a good sum, 500 gold coins if he can restore this bow. That's right, a lot. So he dismisses Bell without much ceremony, saying that he will call him again whenever he needs his service. Take that, Bell. Bell storms out of the room, burning with rage and already thinking about getting back at Ryosul for ruining his evil plans. After Bell finally leaves, Barnes turns to Ryosul and asks what they should do to restore the bow. And Ryosul, with the confidence of someone who knows what's up, reveals that they need to find buffalo horns and whale tendons. He further adds that they will need charcoal, mulberry, bamboo, and of course the right tools. Without those, it won't work, right? After the mission to identify everything necessary, Ryo finally acquires the restoration method for the bow. It's now or never. The system warns that the items will be destroyed if the restoration does not reach at least 70%. Ryo touches the bow, and out of nowhere, memories of when he worked on a bow with his father start flooding back. It's a lot of feeling. Tears stream down his face as sweet memories drift, and even his game capsule registers a synchronization rate of 99.9%. It's a lot of love. Ryosul, filled with gratitude, rejoices in being able to craft it properly, all thanks to the skills his father taught him. What a good vibe. Just when he is about to start the restoration, Barnes, with that collaborative spirit, walks into the room and says he is willing to help. Let's go before they notice. They've been working on this all day. The dedication is high. Barnes starts to feel his arm weakening, but on one side he seems mega energetic and super happy while working. In the air, it's pure energy. At some point, Barnes, already a bit tired, wants to take a break, but Yunsu gives that firm response, reminding him that there's no room for that. He reminds Barnes that he came to the workshop specifically to help restore his family's relic. It's pure nostalgia. Man. Barnes agrees with Yunsu and mentions that the bow is the only item that carries memories of his father. I'm feeling the emotion here. Barnes then comments that Yunsu enjoys working in the air, and the protagonist confirms, saying he has many precious memories of working on a bow. The two keep working hard, and before they realize it, more than 20 days have passed since they started. Time flies. Finally, they reach the final day and manage to completely restore the archer's bow. Wow! Mission accomplished. The system displays the incredible stats of the bow, and apparently it has been upgraded beyond what it was before. That's right, overcoming. With that, a mysterious mysterious stranger from the bowmaster's family appears again. Barnes is certain that his father will be very proud. They take the bow outside and Yunsu asks Barnes to test it to see if it feels the same as he remembered. I'm excited. Barnes fires the bow, and my friend, it releases so much aura that it destroys the target. This guy is awesome. Barnes then tells Yunsu that it doesn't seem the same, and Yunsu starts to worry, thinking it might be a criticism. But hang on. Barnes dissipates the tension with a radiant smile, saying that the bow feels much superior to what it was before. Yay! With that, Yunsu finishes the bow restoration mission with a result that exceeds 100%. It's definitely a success. Because of this, our protagonist's affinity with Barnes reaches the maximum level. Kind of. Like a responsive friendship with a deep sigh of relief. Yunsu thanks fate for everything working out so perfectly, like a miracle operating in his favor. Barnes, super grateful, cheers with Yunsu, because now he can return to his duties. Then, Barnes comments that the reward of 500 gold coins was a bit miserable, so he raises it to 2,000. In other words, an amount that shocks anyone. And as if that weren't enough, he grants Yunsu free access to the forge, a huge help. Yunsu is completely stunned to realize that this is enough money for him in real life. Like it's a dream. As the celebration runs wild, Barnes touches him and asks if Ryunsu is interested in learning fencing. Barnes then drops a bombshell. Before I became the lord of the land, I was a top-notch swordsman. He explains that his sword art is the secret technique that subdued the monster crowd, bringing peace and stability to the region. Barnes admits that Ryunsu is a worthy and capable blacksmith, but the guy is also recognizing his hidden potential as a swordsman. He read this in Welson's letter of recommendation, but saw what Ryunsu can really do with his powerful demonstration. Because of all this, Barnes is excited and willing to share some swordsmanship secrets with Ryunsu. Then the system displays the skill search for Ryunsu to visualize, and apparently the prime sword art is a B-grade art. Barnes warns that training will be intense, just like the experiences they had in the workshop. A month after that, our boy was fully involved in creating his own Hakun, the clear one. Additionally, he also dedicated himself to restoring the rusted armor of the Mad Monarch, surpassing himself in everything. He has been training like a true warrior, giving his all to be the best. With all of Barnes's help, he completes the training of the prime sword art, feeling ready for anything. The South confirms he is ready and does not forget to thank Barnes for being an amazing mentor throughout the process. Barnes, curious, asks what Ryunsu's next plan is, and he responds that he's keeping an eye out for a new job. Ryunsu now shines wearing the restored and shimmering armor of the Mad Lord, looking like a true icon. Barnes, always concerned, assures that Ryunsu can return at any time if he needs help. Ryunsu is filled with satisfaction from the equipment he made, which will not only strengthen his weaknesses, but also help in life. He created rare bows and decided to sell them at the auction house because that's how business runs. This time, he names the bow the second bow of Rai because nothing less will do. He gets lost in thought, wondering how much that bow will sell for because expectations are high. In the end, that bow is made of rare materials, like things that probably won't show up again. Run, the master of the Golden Shield Guild, soon hears about the bow and recognizes the greatness of what Ryunsu has done. Because of this, Rooney is impressed that Ryunsu managed to create something so positive, using low-grade materials. That's because there's a saying that the game tends to give players a job, skill, or title that fits what they do. Ryo Sul, who is no fool, comes to the conclusion that he needs to have a legendary title, just like the #1 blacksmith, the famous Smith. You know how it is, right? This kind of thing goes viral when the final offer finally comes. The bow is sold for over 2,000 gold coins, something that leaves Ryo Sul shocked, as if he had been slapped in the face. He is left speechless, unable to believe that people are willing to fork out such absurd money for a simple bow. Furthermore, the boy ends up amassing over 3,000 followers, a number that makes any streamer envy. And as if that weren't enough, along with this fame comes hundreds of guild requests and creations that Ryo Sul can barely keep up with. It's a complete chaos. After organizing the sales, our protagonist decides it's time to enter the famed Holy Land of Blacksmiths, also known as the Blacksmith's Tower. It is the Magical League. What happens next? He arrives at the majestic blacksmith tower and is simply dazzled by the intricate design, as if he were in a game. When he reaches the entrance, he is confronted with a huge padlock surrounded by a seal on the door and starts to think about how he will get into that beauty. The system informs him that to unlock the padlock, he needs to strike the seal with a sword forged in that magical forge, and that already leaves him in doubt. Before he can do anything, Ryo Sul examines the padlock and realizes it is made of some kind of rock, an igneous rock, so it seems. the matter is serious. While he is still questioning where that magical forge is, he is suddenly teleported to a place that looks more like a dream blacksmith's workshop, and the system informs him that his mission now is to receive training to forge the sword needed to pass the test. Moreover, he discovers that he will have unlimited materials and tools at his disposal. Imagine the mess. With that, the system also informs him that the crafting time will be much shorter compared to a normal forge. That's what you call a boost. However, any sword he forges there can only be used for the test, and nothing more. A true double-edged sword. Ryo-Sul begins to question what this test really is. He doesn't know if it involves forging skills or something entirely different. Meanwhile, Dang, the master of the tower, is convinced that nobody cares about metallurgy for the love of art. Once again, Dang. Disappointed with people who don't love metallurgy the way they should, he decides to give the title of blacksmith to anyone, since folks just want the title for selfish reasons. Dang is calm, thinking that no one will be able to cut the stone from the ceiling. Meanwhile, Ryo-Sul, focused, decides he will forge a Damascus sword. This type of sword can only be forged by the most skilled blacksmiths, and with all the materials at hand, the boy is determined to try. He remembers his father, who always said that a sword must have what it takes to cut another sword, and he taught him how to do this back in the day. Pure nostalgia, Ryo-Sul is filled with confidence, thinking he will also succeed in this classic mission. They consider themselves lucky, as everything they need is right there, and even the forging time has been reduced. The boy smiles with anticipation, as he is about to work on a sword the way he wants, which hasn't happened in a long time. Meanwhile, Dang, who is having the best nap in the world, wakes up to strange vibrations making the tower tremble. He is shocked and can't believe the tower is actually shaking because someone is hammering like there's no tomorrow. Dang, with wide eyes, doesn't want to believe what he's seeing until he looks out the window and sees that the entry lock has been cut as if it were nothing. Dang, with a look like he's seen a ghost, rushes to the entrance, just as Ryo-Sul is about to commit a heroic act and concludes that the god of blacksmiths has finally appeared. With a certain anxiety in the air, Ryo-Sul asks Dang if he actually passed the test. Dang explains that all he has been doing is measuring skill through the stone sauna, but the problem is that Ryo-Sul cut the stone in half. So, guess what? They couldn't get any measurement. Upon hearing this, Ryo-Sul starts to think that perhaps he is about to go through a new test. Dang, all mystical, takes him to a magic circle and reveals that this is an invocation cycle. Something with a very cool RPG vibe, with the air of someone who has an ace up their sleeve. Dang picks up the hammer and presents it to Ryo-Sul, saying it now belongs to him. Ryo-Sul looks confused, but as he grabs the hammer, the system activates with a message informing him that he has just received the Alliance hammer and that an S-class mission is about to be activated. Hold on to that! Then, without further ado, Dang pushes Ryo-Sul into the invocation circle, warning him that he has a real test to pass. In a snap, he finds himself in a totally strange area. The details of the mission finally appear on the screen. The system tells him to subjugate the invading orc army, and of course, Ryunsu takes a look around and sees a horde of orcs coming his way. In the blink of an eye, he starts to take charge of Ryo-Sul. Seeing the situation makes him question whether he was really assigned a blacksmith task. Right behind him are 50 warriors, all believing he is a reinforcement sent by Denge. The system then notifies him that he needs to gather 70 contributions from the 50 brave warriors to pass the test. No pressure, the unit leader for subjugation, Ranz, already has his eyes on Ryo-Sul, especially because the orc invasion has spiraled out of control lately. Ranz also reveals that their weapons are in tatters due to battles against the orcs, and they need Ryo-Sul to help repair the swords with his abilities. Nervous, Ryo-Sul tells Ranz he's very mistaken because he hasn't changed his class to blacksmith yet, which means deep down, he still can't use that skill. Ranz, curious, asks about the hammer Ryo-Sul is holding, and our boy, a bit anxious, reveals that he got the hammer during his advancement test. Ryo-Sul explains that he was just sent to do an additional test, and that's when Ranz realizes the boy still lacks real combat experience. It became clear to Ranz that Ryo-Sul admits his combat level is still at the beginner stage. Ranz's expression changes upon hearing this, as he was expecting someone to rev up the situation, but it seems they sent an apprentice instead. Ranz then shouts for him to stay in the watchtower, which is where safety reigns while they head into battle. At that very moment, an axe flies towards Ranz, and without thinking, Ryunsu rushes to his aid and cleaves the axe in half. Ranz's eyes widen in shock and amazement as he witnesses this scene. Ryunsu, feeling a bit awkward, admits he is inexperienced, but asks if he can join the fight. Recognizing the boy's determination, Ranz agrees, and Ryunsu joins the unit heading to the battlefield. Inside his head, he hopes to stay calm if he can face the orcs the same way he did with the goblins. Rans, as the commander, then orders Ryunsu to follow the team, which will give instructions on how to move. With everything spinning quickly, Ryunsu soon finds himself face to face with the orcs and notices they are quite different from the goblins he faced before. Ryo-sul finally enters the battle, firm in his conviction that he will not lose this fight. The first orc that charges at him ends up losing its head before he can even blink. Due to having defeated an orc and a suba, an impressive 86 experience points, a smile emerges on his face as he realizes that last month, training alongside Barnes was truly worth it. He also levels up even without a fixed job, and when he witnesses this, it becomes clear that Ryo-sul is a really amazing guy. However, talking to Ryo-sul is good for him, but it also breaks his concentration, and when Ryo-sul realizes that he is about to be surrounded by an orc, he quickly switches his sword for his bow with impressive precision. Ryo-sul shoots an arrow that goes directly towards the orc, and by the time the creature finally notices, it is already too late. The arrow pierces through the orc and throws it back with immense force, but he doesn't stop there. Ryo-sul fires another arrow that shatters the head of another orc effortlessly. Ryo-sul levels up once again, but what really impresses him is that Ryo-sul managed to take down a huge orc with just one arrow. Hans shouts to him, warning him to get out of his comfort zone because the orcs are already approaching Ryo-sul's position. He realizes that Ryo-sul may have gotten himself into trouble because of him. A fear grows in him as he worries that Ryo-sul is about to pay a high price for his courage, but Ryo-sul quickly switches his bow for the sword Lightbringer. He activates the ability Flurry, which indiscriminately eliminates all enemies within a 10-meter radius. The sword begins to glow and Ryo-sul easily cuts through the orcs surrounding him, showing who is in charge. He also levels up again and manages to achieve an incredible contribution of 19%. In light of this scene, Hans becomes optimistic, believing that with Ryo-sul by his side, they truly have a chance of winning this war. Then Hans shouts for his soldiers to hear, proclaiming that they finally have a chance to defeat the orc unit, something they have never been able to achieve before. As the fight continues, the team's morale soars like a rocket, and Ryo-sul already feels like part of the unit. Continuing his fight, Ryo-sul notices that upon reaching 20% contribution, his progress is starting to slow down a bit. At that moment, the system informs him that he is defeating the orcs faster than all the others, and has therefore unlocked a new chapter that had never been accessed before. Momentarily, they encounter a level 51 orc warrior. Hans, upon seeing this, becomes worried and immediately orders his men to stop advancing. They have tried several times to defeat this orc warrior, but have never succeeded. The situation is already not good for them, as they are surrounded by orcs. Hans begins to fear that his excessive determination is becoming a liability. He has ventured too deep into enemy territory. At that moment, Ben rises and encourages the warriors, asserting that they will be able to defeat the orcs. Hans agrees with Ben, as everyone is tired of being tormented and chased by the orcs. From a high vantage point, he watches his team advance, determined to attack the orcs, deciding to support his comrades. Rian, with his bow, picks an arrow and shoots at the orc warrior, aiming for its head, but the arrow ends up ricocheting off the orc's helmet. Faced with this situation, the team realizes that it may be necessary to retreat to restructure their strategy. However, Hans, in a fit of bravery, makes a bold move towards the orc warrior. What happens? He ends up losing his dominant hand. Thus, a risky play. Hans, now in a critical situation, finds himself at the mercy of the orc when suddenly his partner Ryo-sul bursts in from behind, shouting his name. He is hoping that Hans still has a chance for survival. Soon he finds himself in a desperate situation, surrounded by a horde of orcs. The atmosphere is tense. Even severely injured, Hans manages to find a little safety among the soldiers who are still holding their ground amidst the chaos. Meanwhile, Ryo-sul tries everything, but his arrows fail to pierce the armor of the imposing orc warrior. Realizing that the casualties are rapidly increasing, Ryo-sul makes a decision and orders the soldiers to form a defensive line, planning a strategic retreat to the forest just behind. He addresses the soldiers, stating that he will follow them soon, leaving no one behind. Then Ben, one of the closest companions, reiterates the order, insisting that they need to get the captain to a safe place where they can reorganize and think of a plan. The soldiers start running towards the forest, but Ben, filled with concern, stays back to inform Ryo-sul that they won't be able to run as fast in the forest. He reinforces that this choice will only buy them some time, but they have to make do. Ryo-sul then realizes that all he needs is just 5 minutes to make a difference, and asks Ben if he and the soldiers can hold out that long. Ben, with a heroic glint, assures Ryo-sul that yes, they will hold out those 5 minutes, serving to bolster morale. Ryunsul then pauses and focuses on the orc's armor. He refuses to believe it is so resistant to his arrows. At that moment, he decides to wield Dank's hammer. It proves to be an epic and decisive item in the battle. With the hammer, the speed of his plan's execution increases. Almost as if by magic, while Ben and the soldiers are still struggling against the order, Rinso is concocting something quite interesting. Even tired, Ben and his team face the battle head-on, ready to hold the line until Rinso completes his plan. Bleeding and battered, he continues to push forward, motivated by the idea that he just needs to wait 5 more minutes. At this critical moment, Ben finds himself face to face with the orc warrior, and just when it seems like everything is about to end, a powerful projectile suddenly flies toward the orc. The projectile hits the orc warrior with incredible force, breaking his armor and piercing through his body. There is blood everywhere, and Ben is left completely bewildered, not understanding anything that just happened. He turns to check and sees Ryansu standing in the distance, emanating a powerful aura worthy of a true hero. With all the calm in the world, Ryansu draws his bow again, aims at the orc warrior, and fires. The projectile shatters the monster's head, bringing him down, finally defeated. Ben, utterly stunned by the scene, soon realizes that Ryansu has equipped a new item on his bow. Ryansu's bow now glows with an item called Agile Arrow, which provides 70% penetration and 60% speed. Basically, it's a short arrow, but it flies faster than a comet and carries destructive strength capable of shattering even a rock. Ryansu is able to use this incredible arrow thanks to the brilliant tube he made with bamboo, like a DIY master. Adrenaline runs high as Ryansu continues his assault. Seeing the orc warrior getting back up, the soldiers feel invigorated, ready to charge and buy time for their comrade. With firm confidence, Ryansu again aims his bow at the orcs, knowing that the arrow's penetration power is comparable to that of a musket. And there goes another shot, straight into the orc warrior's neck, taking him down once and for all. Finally, Hilson receives the notification. He has defeated the EA orc warrior. And that's not all. A flood of notifications pops up about his level, and he levels up upon receiving confirmation of the orc's death. The protagonist has just earned the title of Orc Slayer, which is like a super upgrade that increases his attack power against those big green brutes by 15%. And to make the situation even better, now the orcs will be scared to death just hearing his name. Soon, the other orc warrior, feeling the chill of that power our hero is exuding, after eliminating his friend, takes off running, throwing his weapon away. But the thing is, Ryansu is not at all willing to let the guy escape and charges towards him, determined. He intercepts him, looking like a true machine of destruction, as if it were a demon, and fires a deadly arrow at the fleeing orc. He was already in a panic. The arrow hits its mark and literally takes the orc's head off, causing Ryunsu to stand triumphantly over a pile of orc bodies. He completed his mission of subjugating the army, and on top of that, his contribution rate is now skyrocketing, reaching 92%. My friend, the system is straightforward and indicates that he put on a show, completing the mission with impressive results. A roar. A victory erupts among the soldiers who waste no time and start applauding Ryunsu, truly applauding that badass. The system informs that the subjugation unit fully trusts Ryunsu's orders, so it's as if he has become the top dog of the team. He also receives a hidden piece as if it were a participation prize and, as the battle leader, gains a special effect that gives him 10 charisma points. Well, he approaches and helps Rans to his feet, taking him to where Ryunsu is. The whole crowd is moving. Rans, all emotional, sincerely thanks Ryunsu, saying that he never would have imagined they could defeat the orcs. He pounds his chest, even with his arm severed, as a sign of respect, and the other soldiers do the same. Total tribute. Ryunsu reciprocates the gesture by placing his hand on his chest and thanking all the soldiers. That beautiful moment of camaraderie as the mission comes to an end, Ryunsu lets out a sigh of relief and looks at the sunset, already preparing to return to the blacksmith's tower. All dirty, he wonders how he will do this since the mission was intense. Apparently, the Council of Blacksmiths, led by Dane, has been searching for a worthy blacksmith who can wield the powerful sword they possess. They cannot just hand the sword over to anyone, given that most blacksmiths these days only think about money instead of creating something perfect. Still, the council believes in the prophecy that a successor to the god of blacksmiths will arise to restore the clan's prosperity. In this atmosphere of expectation, they believe they have found the right person and have called the other blacksmiths to gather at the central tower. But then comes Coulson, the lord of the Arcos blacksmith's tower, who is not in agreement with Dane's decision to give the sword to a complete stranger. Dane, in turn, responds to Coulson by saying that Ryunsu has already met all the conditions they imposed for the delivery of the sword. Furthermore, Ryunsu has not yet chosen a specific profession, has already proven his leadership, and with his blacksmithing skills has dismantled the orc warriors. When the other lords hear this, their curiosity is piqued, as they can't believe that someone without a rank did something so incredible. Dane emphasizes that the prophecy states that the successor of the god of blacksmiths will be stronger than anyone who has ever existed, and he believes that the sword will provide the definitive answer they are seeking. At that moment, the butler arrives to inform Denge that Rinsu has arrived at the hall, and Denge, all excited, orders that he be brought in quickly. Rinsu pushes the door open and is greeted by Denge, who informs him that he has passed the test, which now guarantees him entry to the blacksmith's sanctuary. Furthermore, he has also earned the right to challenge the sword of prophecy, the one left by the god of blacksmiths. Got it? He explains that everything will be revealed once he takes the sword, and after that he will receive a great reward. Rinsu's curiosity quickly surfaces, and he wonders if the reward will be a legendary class, since he just completed an SS rank mission. At that moment, one of the lords praises Rinsu's work, confirming that he did an excellent job preparing those quick arrows at such a critical moment. You know? However, the boy is not 100% satisfied, as he believes that the arrows are nothing more than mere imitations of what he could truly do, which is cringe. One of the lords, thinking Rinsu is just lucky, comments that he would never have come this far if he hadn't had an epic bow from the start. The people present are not convinced and demand that he pull the sword so they can finally see if this is all just a facade. Rinsu realizes that these lords are nothing less than masters from the blacksmith's tower. Each of them forged the daily legends. That is, man, it's a team of incredibly skilled blacksmiths. They are almost like ultra-high-level NPCs, with titles and levels that are simply absurd. To give you an idea, Coulson is an impressive blacksmith who reached level 365. That guy is formidable, right? Rinsu admits that they are all indeed impressive, but he can't see himself as a blacksmith below them. Like, you can't underestimate the guy. He begins to wonder what would happen if they competed without the help of titles, and the tension starts to build as Rinsu approaches the sword. Suddenly, it emits an overwhelming aura, leaving everyone in the room speechless. It's wild. The sword finally shines intensely and merges with Rinsu's body, forming an explosive connection. The protagonist remains unaware of this and continues to be confused, wondering where the sword disappeared to, while the situation is quite insane. Denge. He finds the starting point, has figured out what went down, and feels satisfied that all his suspicions were correct. This only makes the situation even more intriguing. He bursts into loud laughter, claiming that he finally understands the true meaning of how the prophecy is fulfilled. Basically, everything they had been doing until then was creating rituals and procedures without ever doing the right thing. Cole, on the other hand, is absolutely furious and refuses to accept the idea that Ryosul could be the successor, and it's heating up. Soon, Ryosul receives the notification congratulating him for becoming the first god class in the game, leaving everyone in shock. Coulson simply can't believe that a guy considered trash earned the god class. Without hesitation, how crazy. The system, as if it were a recognition award, soon promotes Ryosul to the god of blacksmiths, and the atmosphere gets even hotter. At that moment, Ryosul was a level 10 player. Now he sees himself as the god of blacksmiths. And to top it off, he is the first in history, different from the others. Danny is there, excited and cheering for Ryosul's achievement, and it's contagious. On top of everything, he also earns a rank SSS title, the God of Blacksmiths, which is simply insane. This title gives him the ability to break material level restrictions whenever he is forging, meaning it's hard level. And whenever he is creating artifacts, his mastery increases depending on the type of material, which means he will surpass anyone in the blacksmith class. Soon, the system warns that the sword test will begin as soon as he reaches level 100. While the other lords are starting to adapt to the idea, Cole, on his part, screams with rage, making it clear that he is not ready to accept all of this. He tells his companions that they can't choose the god of blacksmiths just because the sword decided it, and the atmosphere is tense. Danny, trying to smooth things over, says the prophecy is absolute, but Cole retorts that only someone recognized by all the lords of the tower will be the true successor of the god of blacksmiths, and that is part of the prophecy. With all his anger, Coulson uses the situation to his advantage and challenges Ryosul to a blacksmith duel, and adrenaline rises. Coulson assures Ryosul that if he can defeat him in the duel, he will finally be recognized as the true blacksmith, accepting him as the true successor. Got it? That was all the crazy guy wanted. But look, Ryosul won't have a way out because if he takes that defeat, he will have to give up the title. Crazy, right? Dang, all fired up, he gets worried upon hearing this. And he shoots at the colleagues who need to block, but surprise, no one moves. And there's Dan, a bit confused, not understanding why the crowd isn't doing anything to contain Coulson. Like, what's going on? Coulson, all sly, throws it to Ryosul that he has the freedom to withdraw from the duel, and in return, he promised him the position of Vice Lord of the Tower. Look at the maneuver. And there Coulson is, all smiling, thinking that Ryosul will back down. But in reality, Ryosul is embracing this challenge opportunity without thinking twice. Our hero accepts the duel. After all, he believes that the true essence of a blacksmith reveals itself in his skill. Respect the system of the scene. He's sending him to face Coulson on a mission. Let's go to war. Coulson, all pompous, explains that a blacksmith duel doesn't work the same way as a knight's combat. No, man, this thing is different. He warns that the forged items that will have their souls embedded determine who the great winner is. Natalia, from what it seems, they are going to clash their swords against each other, and the one that breaks first is done for, lost. Coulson, all full of himself, reveals that he already has a high-quality forge set up in the hall, ready for this duel. Web. And believe me, man, do you think Ryosul will be able to forge a sword in just one day? Think he's the king of the business? He lets out a loud, challenging laugh, saying that Ryosul will only be able to do that if he really is the god of blacksmiths. With the challenge thrown down, Coulson promises to meet with Ryosul the next day, like a heavy metal duel. After Coulson leaves, Dane drops the truth, expressing concern that Ryosul accepted the duel without thinking it through. He explains that Coulson is like a monstrously skilled blacksmith, even among the masters of the tower. The kid is in deep trouble here, saying that Ryosul still needs time to grow. Even with the skills of a god, you can't lose your humility, right? Then Ryosul reveals that without changing classes, he would be doomed to lose the duel. He needed to turn the tide. He knows Coulson must have impressive skills after all. He is the master of the tower. But by switching to the class of god, the difference between them became small. In the end, the difference now will only be in skill. This is all a result of the new ability our hero scored. This new ability is called God's tailor-made creation. There's already a touch of lust in those words. Huh? A power that allows him to create any artifact he imagines with a master's touch. Furthermore, he can imbue the artifact with any effect he wants. It has unlimited potential, no doubt about it. Of course, the higher the level of the effect, the more difficult the crafting becomes. But the play is sure. The technique is heavy. Meanwhile, Coulson is already in his forge, all focused, sculpting the sword of dreams. He sees himself as the chosen one, having inherited his father's blacksmithing skills. Then, he found the master who was superior to him. What a sadness, right? Coulson is resentful for coming face to face with someone better than him, but he had no other choice. Life is like that. However, he will never accept that someone of unknown origins has come to become his lord. What a scene. Driven by fury and determination, Coulson wields the hammer with precision and power, as if he were forging his very soul. The battle is approaching. Get ready, it's going to be thrilling and explosive. Meanwhile, the protagonist Ryunsu is also there, all focused, working on his sword. We know that when it comes to infusing artifacts with magical abilities and effects, it's always like this. To gain something, you have to lose something else. Dang observes that Ryunsu will have to maximize the sword's strength if he wants to gain an advantage in the duel. And to get there, the gods of the tower usually create at the highest level they can. But inside, Dang is worried that Ryunsu won't be able to manage this, as his stats are way down, only at the rare level. Even so, he's wondering, what goes through Ryunsu's mind while he hammers and forges his sword? After a long and tense night, the long-awaited moment of the duel finally arrives. What is that sound? Ryunsu takes his place in the hall, with all the other lords of the tower watching as witnesses. Coulson, all self-assured, lets out a mocking laugh and claims that he managed to create something incredible overnight, and that's why he did not back down from the fight. He throws out one of his remarks, saying he wants to see if Ryunsu's skills truly compare to someone worthy of being a successor to a god. Meanwhile, Ryunsu remains silent. His expression gives away nothing. Then, Coulson simply pulls a shining sword from its sheath and presents it. This is his creation, the Black Knight's sword, a sword that stands out, boasting an impressive 12,000 durability points. And that's not all. It also comes with one passive ability called Weapon Breaker. Dang, who has already seen Coulson's potential, is not surprised by this display, but he is still impressed to see that Coulson managed to forge a perfect dual sword of unique grade in just one night. With a mischievous smile, Coulson is sure that everyone is noticing the perfection of his creation. He has reinforced this sword with the tradition and secret techniques he inherited from his family. As soon as Rinsu can no longer stand Coulson's bragging, he finally draws his own sword. Coulson nearly bolts when Rinsu is about to showcase his creation. Dang is also eagerly awaiting Rinsu's revelation, but the excitement quickly turns to disappointment as everyone sees Rinsu's sword. Rinsu's sword is nothing more than a rare-grade sword, with only 1,000 points of durability. The other tower gods also share this disappointment and are starting to agree that Coulson is right. With a satisfied smile, Coulson is convinced that he will destroy Rinsu and finally put him in his place. Coulson takes the lead, running towards Rinsu, determined to end him once and for all. Meanwhile, Rinsu stands firm, adopting a defensive stance, anxiously awaiting Coulson's attack. That's when the swords clashed in a thunderous impact, and one of them was cleanly severed. The Tower Lords, incredulous, watch as it is surprisingly Coulson's sword that breaks. Coulson simply cannot believe what is happening. Looking at his broken sword on the ground, he cannot help but ask Rinsu how he did it. Then, Rinsu reveals a truth. Swords cannot be evaluated solely by their grade. It turns out that Rinsu's sword is equipped with an active ability that protects it from breaking, unless its durability points reach 0. And considering that the only hit they exchanged only deducted 100 points from the sword's durability, it's all good, right? Upon hearing this, Coulson recalls a conversation he had with his father when he mentioned that the god of blacksmiths would one day appear, and that this god would be the one to reconfigure the way they think and see things. How wild. His father mentioned that everyone would have the chance to meet this legendary blacksmith. Just imagine. That created an absurd expectation back then. Coulson was excited, nearly jumping for joy just thinking about meeting the gods of blacksmithing. Thanks to what he learned from his father, Hyunsu already knew that breaking Coulson's sword wouldn't be enough to impress the Tower Masters, so he decided to create a sword that cuts other swords, like a true game changer. When Hyunsu revealed his plan to Dank, his reaction was one of total skepticism. The crazy guy was like, "Wow, how are you going to do that?" Ryo-sul recognized that it wouldn't be simple, no, but creating an artifact like that depends heavily on Ferrero's skill and the amount of sweat he puts in, like really sweating it out. Dan finally realized that Rinsu is a guy who makes bold decisions that challenge all common logic. The dude is tough. Coulson, completely shattered and emotional, finally opens his mouth to acknowledge Rinsu as a legend. He asks, with a hopeful look, if he will ever be able to make a sword that can also cut other swords. The guy's desire is palpable. Rinsu, with a cheeky smile, responds to Coulson that there is nothing that can be called impossible. Coulson, emotional, starts to cry and kneels, pledging loyalty to Hyunsu. What a touching moment. With that, Hyunsu concludes the blacksmith duel mission, an epic victory. As soon as the situation stabilizes, Hyunsu is treated as the great mind that he truly is. Finally, respect arrives. The first reward they give him is 500 gold coins, which have him on Cloud 9, a real-life upgrade. Besides the 500 coins, they also hand him a scroll containing the recipe for the legendary heir. In other words, the guy is on the right track. This heir is one of the 10 super rare treasures of the blacksmith's tower. Coulson, with that hopeful look in his eyes, confesses that he has never managed to complete the recipe for heir, but knows that handing it to someone who is on the path to becoming very powerful is the right choice. Dan also holds on to it. Ryo-sul, the lords are ready to change their attitude with Rinsu's arrival, as everyone is excited to support the guy. They practically force Rinsu to take the top of the power. What pressure, huh? After leaving the game, Rinsu finds his friend and is surprised to see that he is doing super well in the game. He believes all that suffering in the forge is finally paying off. Right? Then, seriously, he asks him, Kyu, about the benefits of being a god class, expecting a stunning response. Rinsu replies that actually it isn't anything spectacular right away, but he knows it has potential. Rinsu then reveals that the next day, he needs to pay his father's hospital bill. This is never good news, right? Apparently, they added another 10 million ons to the medical bills. The situation is tense. Jiru, on his part, reveals that he researched the new medication that Rinsu wanted for his father. With everything that Jiru found out, the total medical cost comes to 20 million ons, and that is still not covered by insurance. GM adds that the treatments for Rinsu, they will also cost a fortune, and the new class of god might still not handle all of this. Basically, there is a limit to how many artifacts Ryunsu will be able to create and sell, considering his endurance. GM then comments that the need to level up and gain fame is vital, meaning the growth of our hero as a god is undoubtedly super important. He gives the tip that the boy should befriend the players who are famous, as this is the only role that can provide better rewards and rare items of the same category as rum. It is expected that the protagonist will use this strategy as a basis to create the most epic artifacts possible to help with everything he has already accounted for and to make everything even better. Rum assures that he has a secret plan to give a boost in the group's chat in the game. The crowd is commenting about a certain player named Lord, who was recently promoted to the legendary class. Players are astonished to see this and discover that Lord reached this level simply by defeating King Barad. But look, by defeating him, he managed to strike just one blow, which is something that no one else had been able to do up to that moment. This leaves everyone curious, wondering how the guy managed to pull off this feat. The next day, Ryunsu realizes that he still faces a big problem to pay his father's hospital bills because it's really tough. Even with the money he earned from the game, it's still not enough. Meanwhile, Hilson is over there questioning how he's going to get the money to pay his father's hospital bill. And right at that moment, he receives a notification that his first custom sword was sold for 53,000 gold coins to the player Lo. This happens just in the nick of time. Hilson rushes to the hospital to inform the attendant that he can finally pay his father's almost overdue bills. Since the money appeared right at the moment of desperation, God realizes that Arias is his salvation, and there's no way he can stop playing this game. Just when he's in that vibe, Lord sends a message to our hero, saying he managed to pass Barad's test thanks to the sword. Lord believes that the 50 million ons he paid for the sword were worth every penny. Considering its power, he managed to create a breach with the sword, which even surprised Barad himself. Lord then gets real with Ryunsu. Barad, the king of the Goyar kingdom, is waiting for him. It seems that Barad wants the protagonist to create a sword for him. Ryunsu is in shock upon reading the message, and Lord emphasizes that he needs to go after Barade. Leaving the hospital, Ryunsu realizes that finally, he has the power to solve all problems, including the new medical treatment and his father's hospital bills. The only thing he needs to do is find Barad and figure out how to locate the lost forge. Later, Ryunsu tries to contact Barad but ends up hitting a barrier. He is informed that he cannot see Barad yet because his level is too low. In fact, the protagonist needs to increase his level and fame a bit more if he really wants to find Barad, who nearly faints upon discovering he needs to be at least a level 200 player before he can see Barad. So, he asks if there is any other way to see Barad. The crowd responds that he can use the Goyari martial arts tournament. This tournament takes place every year in the Goyarde kingdom, but players can only participate if they are between levels 50 and 60. And guess what? Barad is always there because he is on the lookout for powerful warriors, which is why Barad, our dear warrior, organizes this tournament every year, attracting outsiders from all over. And the Mind Jerem, with that air of someone who knows what they are talking about, informs Ryunsu that the tournament is about to start and that the winner will receive a cash prize directly from Barad's hands. This becomes Ryunsu's only chance to find Barad since his current level is too low. Later, Dang, always strategizing, tells Ryunsu to head to the castle territory, located in the mine between Prime and Goya, where the war against the undead is always happening. Dang is realistic and believes that Ryunsu's skills will be very much needed there. According to Dang, this territory is the best place if Ryunsu wants to level up quickly. With that in mind, our hero, Ryunsu, sets off towards the castle, determined to complete the mission regardless of the difficulties he will face. Soon, he arrives at the castle territory and comes face to face with Lander, a level 26 warrior. Lander informs him that they are waiting for reinforcements, as the number of undead invading the area has increased. Ryunsu is shocked to hear this and asks if there is any reason all of this is happening. Lander explains that the undead army is always dealt with more easily when the sacred bell of Ramos rings on their lands. They had used this to keep the enemies at bay for some time. After hearing this, Ryunsu has a realization and realizes that it is an event system. The sacred bell has shattered into 1,000 pieces, and without knowing what to do, they are begging for reinforcements to help defend themselves. The situation is tense, because the army of the undead began to realize that something was wrong and started to gather in large numbers. Rinso then poses the question, Can the bell be repaired? It is at this moment that Lander finally has a revelation. Rinso is from Dang, which confirms that he was sent by Dang, the blacksmith of the sword tower. When Lander grasps this information, he becomes more serious and mentions that he was expecting Ryunsu's arrival. He asks Ryunsu to follow because they need to find the commander. Moments later, they encounter Commander Cal. Cal greets Ryunsu appropriately, as he is a member of the Great Dang. Upon hearing Rinso's plan to fix Ramos's bell, Cal becomes disheartened and states that the bell is basically irreparable. Rinso is shocked, and Cal explains that they have tried several times to restore the bell, but have never succeeded. Everyone who tried met the same fate. The bell is an irreparable artifact, but believe it or not, there is still someone in the castle, trying to find a way to repair it, even giving their best. Cal is sure that this is a complete waste of time. The blacksmith is at level 290, yet nothing seems to work. Cal then questions Ryunsu about his level. Ryunsu responds that he is still at level 13. The commander and his subordinate are taken aback upon hearing this. Cal humbly advises Ryunsu to seek someone of his level for help because the situation is critical, and they cannot afford to waste a second. Especially when the commander tries to convey this to Ryunsu, a soldier runs in, informing that the undead are invading the eastern wall. A true tsunami of Gus is coming at them. Cal, filled with urgency, does not waste time and quickly warns his people about the crucial importance of defending the main gate with all their strength. Before leaving, Cal calls Lander to accompany him and makes a point of reinforcing to Ryunsu that everything he has said so far is a big secret that doesn't need to remain among them. Ryunsu, analyzing the situation with a serious look, feels he can complete the mission just as he did when he faced the Ox. He is determined. Soon the mission is officially revealed. Ryunsu is instructed to defeat the invading Gus and protect the castle gate because the situation is dire. As soldiers reported, the army of the undead begins to climb the walls in a frightening number, like a true tide of horrors. Ryunsu joins the battle, aiming his bow accurately against the relentless invading army of undead. Realizing the gravity of the situation, he warns that the undead soldiers are complicated to defeat. Without a weapon that has sacred power, the strategy must be to aim at the same spot repeatedly to bring them down. However, Ryunsu teaches a lesson and demonstrates his effectiveness by taking down a Gu's head with a single precise shot. Lander is astonished by the scene, especially because the weapon Ryunsu is using has no sacred power at all. Without hesitation, Ryunsu continues firing his weapon at the infamous undead monsters, showing that he is completely focused. Yunsu manages to wreak such havoc on the undead army that it totally disorganizes their ranks. With his skill, Yunsu pushes them back, giving crucial time for the soldiers to recover and regroup. The soldiers seize the opportunity, and the city begins to cheer for Rios. Even Lander, excited, warns the Gus that they are literally done for. Rios lets out a sigh of relief, as things are going much more smoothly than he expected. He offers a blessing, but suddenly the situation takes a dark turn when a circus giant Gu appears, and the atmosphere changes instantly. The system soon alerts Ryunsu about this new mission, to defeat this terrifying monster that has appeared. With a single stomp, the giant Gu shows itself capable of eliminating an absurd number of soldiers. It is so colossal that its height apparently overshadows the castle walls, and the situation is alarming. The soldiers cannot hide their fear and quickly conclude that Cal might be their only hope. But the problem is that this area is forbidden, as Cal is stuck defending the gate and cannot save anyone. Observing the situation and realizing that the walls are about to give way, Lander panics and realizes that the time is critical. At that moment, Hyunsu decides to grab the Ghoul's attention, determining that he needs to divert the monster to save the others. Lander, still incredulous, asks how Hyunsu plans to do that, while the boy simply jumps off the wall and charges toward the giant Ghoul, determined to face the monster. Lander tries to stop this madness, shouting that it's dangerous to go alone, but Hyunsu is already resolute, and nothing will stop him. He then swaps his bow for a sharp sword and leaps from the castle walls, finding himself face to face with the giant Ghoul, a true titanic duel. As his mission is now to defeat the giant Ghoul, Hyunsu is more than ready to carry this out. Charging toward the giant Ghoul, Hyunsu accomplishes what he wanted, to draw its attention to himself. The Gu begins to chase Ryunsu, and in a way, it seems that his plan to divert the monster is actually working. However, Ryunsu soon realizes that he is in a complicated situation, struggling to stay alive as the giant Gu is much faster than him. I imagined that being extremely stubborn, the giant Gu leaves no room for error. Ryancho ends up having to change his weapon again as Gu approaches, towering over him. Rinso shoots his bow with the confidence that this Gu is smoking. The arrow flies at a speed that leaves anyone in awe, slicing through the air and hitting Gu directly in the head. Gu lets out a thunderous scream, but when he turns to face Rinso, he realizes that the powerful arrow did absolutely nothing against the monstrous giant. Irritated and extremely enraged, Gu stamps his foot on the ground and kicks Rinso before he has a chance to react. The single kick from that brutal Gu drops Rinso's health points to less than 10%, putting him in a real chokehold. As he flies through the air and crashes to the ground, the system warns that he will be disconnected from the game as soon as his health points reach 0. Furious with the situation, Rinso thinks to himself that he can't leave in such a ridiculous way. Pulling himself together, he gets up from the ground, as he is not willing to have a forced farewell from the game. He knows that if this happens, he will lose the chance to participate in the Goyarte martial arts tournament, and with that, his father's hospital bills, his own treatment, and even his dream of reclaiming the blacksmith workshop will go down the drain. With fierce determination, Rinso resolves that he must change his reality, and that is exactly the reason he started playing in the first place. Giving up now is not an option, so he grabs his bow again and fires another volley of arrows directly at Gu's leg. This causes intense pain, and Gu does not hesitate to scream loudly in agony. Gu, in a growing fury, starts charging at Rinso at high speed, while Rinso's health points drop to less than 3%. But there he goes, determined not to give up. He pulls the bow with all his strength, and just as he is about to release the arrow, the string snaps, breaking in his hands. Rinso finds himself completely at the mercy of Gu, with no immediately visible hope. Before he can make any move, a gigantic hand from Gu strikes him, draining his life points down to 1%. Suddenly, Ryan finds himself in a bizarre space and begins to wonder if he has finally reached his end. However, even in this desperate situation, Ryan does not want to give up. He raises his hand as if trying to reach a ledge, seeking support to lift himself up. At that moment, the system notifies him that he has met the special condition required to acquire a new skill. Apparently, this happens when the health points of a divine blacksmith fall below 5%, and since he has an intense desire to succeed, it makes all the difference. The new skill gained is God's emergency forging, allowing him to start forging urgently. The only condition is that he has to forge the weapon within 20 seconds. Additionally, the weapon can only be used for 30 seconds. The pressure will be the order of the day. Ryanso realizes that he has finally achieved the long-awaited opportunity. He was literally praying for a way to complete this crazy mission. He then grabs the hammer and the necessary materials in an absurd rush, while the 20 seconds on the clock are ticking against Google and the atmosphere is tense. Quinsul quickly starts to work, striking the steel with all his strength and determination. Just as the final seconds are running out, Quinsul manages to complete the weapon he so desired. He is instantly transported back to the battlefield and charges at the giant Gu like a true hero. A clean and powerful cut is delivered, slicing through Gu's body with enviable precision. After the impressive strike, Ryanso falls to his knees, as Gu, unable to resist, plummets to the ground with a thud. Ryanso's face lights up with an explosive mix of hope and happiness as he realizes he has accomplished the impossible. The system then communicates that the boy has defeated Google, granting him a ton of experience. But before he could celebrate, bad luck knocks at the door, and he loses consciousness. Lander, frantic, rushes toward the boy, calling his name as if they were on a rescue mission. The next morning, our protagonist recovers and, still dazed, asks the soldiers how much time has passed since his unexpected fainting. He, worried about Gu, is abruptly interrupted by the shouts and applause of the soldiers celebrating his name, calling him a hero. Rio is still confused, until Cal appears to emphasize that his survival depended on him. Cal then asks how Rio achieved such a great feat, but the boy struggles to find words that make sense. He knows that if he tried to explain that what he did was forge a weapon with divine power amidst the chaos, no one would believe him. Cal, noticing his friend's excessive modesty, insists that he definitely deserves all the praise and attention. Gus has a clear weakness. They are vulnerable to sacred power, just like ghosts. That's why Rio Sul forged the Sword of the Four Seals, a weapon with the ability to repel evil spirits. All this knowledge and skill came from his father, who always told these stories when he was a child. Rio Sul celebrates internally for everything having gone right. Although he cherishes the skill he used, He feels regret for knowing he only used it once. Cal then interrupts the boy's nostalgia, saying it's time for him to receive a reward. Cal hands a bag filled with gold to Ryo-Sul, totaling 2,000 gold, something that would leave anyone speechless. As usual, Ryo-Sul is completely astonished and accepts the reward with a beaming smile. Cal takes the opportunity to apologize for how he treated Ryo-Sul earlier. Both Ryo-Sul and the soldiers are in shock at seeing the commander bowing before our protagonist. Ryo-Sul quickly responds that there is no need to apologize. Friendship is worth more. In return, Ryo-Sul thanks the man for acknowledging his efforts, further solidifying the relationship between them. The interaction between the two is so powerful that it brings tears to the soldiers watching. The affinity between Ryo-Sul and Cal shoots to the maximum level, intensifying the situation even more. Then, Cal, overwhelmed with gratitude, makes a formal request to Ryo-Sul. He begs him to fix Ramos's bell, as he felt a divine power in the sword that Ryo-Sul used. Cal expresses full confidence that Ryo-Sul is capable of making the repair. Ryo-Sul promptly responds that he would love to help, but he needs to get to the kingdom of Goyarde as soon as possible. At this moment, Cal drops a bombshell. The Lord has a legendary mineral. Cal explains that the Lord might be willing to give the mineral if it helps repair the bell. This information is enough to spark Ryo-Sul's curiosity, and Cal leads him to the place where the broken fragments of the bell are located. Ryo-Sul is stunned to realize that the bell is completely shattered, not just slightly broken or anything close to that. The situation is much more dramatic than it appears. Cal smiles at him with that puppy-like expression, asking Ryo-Sul if he thinks he will be able to fix the bell. Ryo-Sul, in a mix of nervousness and determination, replies that yes, but deep down, oh, deep down, he is full of doubts. He is worried. The idea of restoring the bell sounds good in theory, but in practice, that's another story. At that moment, a lady appears behind them, driving Ryo-Sul into despair by saying that the bell cannot be repaired, as even she, at her level of 290, could not do it. The lady stands in front of Ryo-Sul with a deadly look and bluntly concludes that he is nothing but a fraud. Earlier, a woman named Belle, who is the leader of the team, had announced without warning that she was leaving the guild. The master of the Golden Shield Guild, Ronnie, was shocked and asked her why she was suddenly resigning, if she really didn't care about everything they had built up to that moment. She, quite straightforward, replied that she was just tired of it all. Rum tried to convince her to stay, claiming that if they could bring the blacksmith Ryan, things would finally get better. But she, completely irritated, retorted that this was exactly the problem, questioning how they could offer 500 million a year to some random player. Ronnie defended that the blacksmith Ryan had sold his first sword, made by him for 50 million won, suggesting that if they could recruit him, the guild would boom. Belle reminded Ronnie that the blacksmith they had brought before was just an external source, and that the guy had later run off with the deposit. She also pointed out that another blacksmith had won the lottery and disappeared, and began listing the guild's failures. Belle asked Ronnie to stop trying to explain how difficult it was to clean up all this mess, and insisted that he not try to stop her. She reluctantly accepted her decision, but still assured him that she would always keep a place for her, in case she ever decided to return. In the castle, Belle arrived and found the village in ruins, in shock, asking how such a place could simply disappear. She thought to herself that this was the place where she learned that people were not just NPCs, but real people, just like her. Belle firmly believed that if they could fix the Rama bell, they might perhaps stop all this destruction. Determined, she decided she needed to go and check the bell again. Upon reaching the bell room, she was surprised to find Rinsen there, a true plot twist. She accused him of being a fraud, creating quite a dramatic scene. Rinsen, confused, shot back, asking who she was to make such accusations. She replied that she was a much higher-level blacksmith than him, creating a tension in the air. Captain Cal, sensing the heavy atmosphere, intervened and asked them not to fight. He introduced Belle as the advanced blacksmith he had mentioned, and Rinsen as the person who helped eliminate the golems. Cal also added excitedly that besides that, Rinsen was now saying he would fix the bell. Belle, incredulous, questioned how a level 38 player could have helped eliminate golems and now claim he would fix the bell. She accused Rinsen of trying to take advantage of the chaotic situation in the Yai Castle region, thinking it was impossible. Tired of that conversation, Ryo-Sul asked what she had been talking about since she arrived. Trying to make sense of that mess, he ignored the chatter and stood there analyzing the pieces of the bell, wondering if, by chance, it had changed in some way. Suddenly, a system window appeared on the screen, confirming that Rama's bell was imbued with a sacred power, though completely destroyed, and restoration was impossible. The protagonist then realized that, by conventional techniques, there was no chance of repair. He, with a resolute air, picked up the hammer and slammed it down on one of the fragments with all the strength he had. Upon seeing this, Belle let out a scream of horror, pleading for him to stop. Calmly, Hyunsoo explained that, in fact, restoration was truly possible and that he knew what he was doing. Belle, filled with anger, asked if he did not understand what it meant to deal with an irreparable artifact. At that moment, a soldier burst into the room, calling for the captain and announcing that the undead were invading in great numbers. The atmosphere changed and everyone was shocked, not knowing what to do. Soon, another system window appeared, and Rinso, for a moment, thought it was a new mission, but with a look of astonishment, realized that it was an update notification. The notification stated that the update for the castle region had begun, and in the end, the updated region would be created. They quickly realized that the region was transforming into a true territory of the undead. Belle thought it was the end, but Hyunsoo quickly corrected her, stating that if they could make the bell, they could stop this madness. Belle, cynical, still tried to find excuses, calling his words impossible, but Hyunsoo remained steadfast and assured her it was possible. Then he turned to Belle and asked, looking into her eyes, if she did not want to protect him. Belle, finally admitting, said Hyunsoo was right, but questioned how they would do it. Hyunsoo, motivated, asked her to follow him as he added the fragments of Rama's bell to his inventory. With a confident smile, Ryo-sul declared that together they would protect that place. Captain Cal, facing Ryo-sul, said he was counting on him to rebuild the bell while he held his lines of defense as long as he could. Ryo-sul, with the scene in his mind, assured him that he could leave that to him. The captain raised his sword and shouted to his men not to lose hope, promising they would fight until the end. He urged them to hold firm, stating they must protect Castel. In the blacksmith's workshop, Belle, curious, he asked Ryo-sul what he had in mind. Ryo-sul confidently explained that when he broke the fragment before, he realized that the sacred power hadn't disappeared, indicating that the power was within the material. He planned to melt that material down and forge a new bell, believing that with the completed bell, the sacred power would become even stronger. Belle was impressed, commenting that she had never seen such a skill before, and Ryo-sul retorted that a skill isn't always necessary to fix things. The fusion began, and Belle, perplexed, questioned whether he was really deciding to do all this by hand. These days, protests were in the air, and Junsu asked why she wasn't helping, explaining that he couldn't do this alone. Meanwhile, in the game developers' offices, one of the developers watched the countdown to the Castel region update. With less than an hour left, our guy was in despair, shouting that the situation was critical and that the update was about to be a total waste. One of his colleagues, not understanding his distress on such an important day, asked what was going on. Quinta and Suki then told the guy to take a look at the screen. The colleague, baffled, asked if all this concern was because of that blacksmith player, like Quinta and Sue, who shot back that an ordinary player wouldn't be up to the task. But the female colleague intervened, informing them that Ryo-sul was definitely not an ordinary player. Finally, the long-awaited day of the Castel region update arrived, and there was no denying it. The battle was heating up. Cal, adrenaline pumping, began shouting orders to stop the undead and prevent them from entering as if they were the visit of an annoying brother-in-law. They fought with all their might, almost breathless, exhausted yet determined. The fight was fierce. The soldiers faced brutal attacks, and one of them was eventually bitten by a massive monster, but Cal didn't let it slide and finally dealt with the creature. Cal ran to check on the guy and shouted for his soldiers to hold on, that the fight was far from over. He reminded them that they needed to protect Castel, the land they had known and loved all their lives. Amidst the chaos, Captain Cal's sword began to show signs of wear, starting to crack. Desperate, he kept wondering what he had done wrong for this to happen. At that exact moment when his sword finally broke, the monster attacked, and Cal was in total shock, as if everything had happened all at once. In a burst of frustration, he cursed the situation. Convinced that everything was unfolding towards a tragic ending, and when all seemed lost, a powerful sound of a bell echoed triumphantly across the battlefield. The undead, clutching their heads as if they had heard the worst music in the world, awakened in pain and began to catch fire, falling one by one as the sound of the bell continued to ring out. The echo of the bell ran through the region, and the defensive forces, with smiles on their faces, looked in the direction from which the "ow" sound was coming. Cal, unable to believe his own luck, exclaimed that the bell of Rama had finally been fixed. Meanwhile, in the developer's office, one of the developers, in shock, splattered his drink when he saw what was happening, hardly believing what his own eyes were witnessing. It seemed that Ryo-Sul had, with all that it had created, a new bell. From the office, one of the developers shouted, completely lost, asking what was happening and if it was true that the update had truly failed. Kim Tae-suk, calm and serene, explained that Ryo-Sul had not closed its eyes for a single second since the countdown to the update began a week ago. It was in that fateful week that, 5 days earlier, Ryo-Sul went straight to the blacksmith's workshop in the castle region, gathering the city's workforce to repair the Bell of Rama. He detailed that they needed to melt everything down to its basic materials, or rather, extract the divine power that existed there. While Ryo-Sul focused on drawing the plans, Bell was tasked with managing the workers and ensuring that everything they needed was on the battlefield. After all this hustle, Ryo-Sul initiated the custom crafting process for the god. He planned to use his skill to maximize the bell's power against those undead and evil forces, as well as to add a skill that would make the monster feel the pain in its soul, the same desire to protect the castle region. Everyone gathered around a single objective, while the workers were determined to do whatever it took to protect their homeland, believing that this would imbue the bell with an even stronger divine power. On the final day, she awoke suddenly, her head filled with questions about when she had fallen asleep. She could not take her eyes off the bell, which was perfect, admiring the masterpiece while trying to process the fact that Ryo-Sul had worked on it day and night, without rest. As if that were not enough, a system window appeared before her, announcing that her apprentice title was shining brightly. Vayu had just witnessed a true crafting process, crafted by a master blacksmith, which resulted in his efficiency in advanced blacksmithing rising by 22%. It's crazy. She found herself in shock, questioning whether that young man was really a master blacksmith. The whole thing was surreal. Ryo-Sul, with a calm demeanor, remarked that the noise must have been quite loud, but she had truly slept like a rock. Belle, indignant, protested that she hadn't been unconscious for that long. Like, really? Ryo-Sul, trying to calm her down, assured her that they were in the final stages and asked her to be a bit patient. Then, out of nowhere, Belle blurted out the question of whether he was indeed a blacksmith. The attention hung in the air. Ryo-Sul confirmed his identity and, with a dramatic gesture, placed his hand on the newly completed bell, which shone with immense energy and had his special symbol engraved on it. Belle looked at the bell with sparkling eyes, saying that calling it beautiful was an understatement. It was a magnificent, almost divine masterpiece. A new system window popped up explaining that this was Ryo-Sul's second custom creation, unique and with infinite durability. A true feat. It was an artifact that had been rebuilt. Something that previously seemed irreparable was now whole. Belle, still in shock, began to ponder if this was the secret behind all that power. She admitted she had never seen anyone achieve something like this, which made everything even crazier. Suddenly, Belle grabbed Ryo-Sul's hands with all her strength and, anxious, asked him to stay with her from that moment on. Ryo-Sul, somewhat confused, asked what she meant, questioning if that was a declaration of love. Belle, all embarrassed, denied the idea. Fast forward to the decisive day of the battle, where Ryo-Sul, now filled with determination, struck the newly completed bell with all his might. A wave of sacred energy reverberated from him, annihilating hordes of undead that moaned in agony as they were consumed by flames. The soldiers, jaws dropped, watched the horrific scene speechless, but with wide eyes. A system message confirmed that Ryo-Sul had created a new bell, eradicating the undead, and could now prevent the upgrade and create a new story. Like, what an epic moment! With a triumphant shout, Ryo-Sul exclaimed that they had succeeded, thanking God for not missing the timing. But soon, extreme fatigue took him down, leaving him completely dazed. Belle, worried, ran to him asking if he was all right as a system message, announced the completion of the repair in the search for the Bell of Rama. A new message indicated that the rewards. They had altered that trolling. Meanwhile, the news flew through the Ares gaming community like wildfire. Someone asked if anyone else knew the blacksmith Riem and opened a thread titled, "The Reason the Castle Region Update Failed," with before and after photos of the bell tower. Players, recognizing the name Riem from a custom sword he made, were shocked to discover that he had repaired Rama's bell. As a result, a crowd of players began to follow Ryon-Su's workshop as if it were the latest trend. Ryon-Su woke up in his bed, dazed by the incessant sound of notifications, wondering what all the noise was. Upon looking, he saw that the number of followers of his workshop had skyrocketed to 100,000, something surreal, and he was stunned. questioning how that was possible. Looking at the screen, Ryonsu smiled, for he realized that it had been a brilliant idea to engrave his name Ryum on the bell. Now, anyone who visited the castle region could see it. What a move! Suddenly, someone knocked on the door requesting permission to enter. With all the enthusiasm in the world, Captain Kao entered, announcing that the great savior of their region had awakened. He informed Ryonsu that he came with the Lord's blessing to deliver a reward for making that famous bell, 330,000 gold coins. That's right, 330,000. Ryonsu was completely stunned by the amount, hardly able to believe he was receiving 330,000. Man, that was an amount that could change anyone's life. The captain added that the savior deserved it, presenting a box with a gift sent directly from the Lord. Ryonsu opened the box and found legendary orichalcum, a true treasure. With a smile on his face, Ryonsu expressed his gratitude to the captain, but Captain Kao reiterated that it was they who should be thanking Ryonsu, as unlike other forest dwellers, he did not abandon his region and instead protected it. The captain expressed his sincere gratitude, demonstrating how admirable Ryonsu's attitude was. Sensing the captain's sincerity, Ryonsu thought that he had merely done what needed to be done and realized that the desperation of the people in Ares was just like the desperation of real life. Then, Ryonsu bid farewell to the captain, saying he needed to return to where he used to live for a while. The captain agreed wholeheartedly, without hesitation. With a firm decision, Ryonsu decided it was time to reclaim his workshop and logged out of the game, while the captain and his companion observed the spot where Ryonsu had disappeared. They say that the outsiders really are a strange group. The next day, in Gongju, Ryu-sul meets with real estate investor Kang Ryu-su. Kang looks at his phone, which displays a message informing him that Mr. Ryu-sul has deposited the impressive amount of 330 million wons. Kang, surprised, tells Ryu-sul that he really did it, and he is totally impressed. A year ago, the two were sitting together while King reviewed the property paperwork. King had said that the total value of those documents amounted to 330 million. He mentions that he heard about the big fire and tries to reassure Hyunsu, stating that the amount should be more than enough for the hospital bills, encouraging him to keep his chin up. As Kang prepares to leave, Hyunsu hesitates and asks if he could buy back the workshop. Kang asks for clarification, surprised by what he just heard. Hyunsu repeats the question, explaining that if he could raise the money, Kang would sell the workshop back to him. Kang, with a worried expression, advises that buying a workshop that was burned would just be a waste of money, and that it would be better to buy him a new one if necessary. But Hyunsu insists that it needs to be their workshop, as that place is filled with memories of his father. King thinks for a moment, contemplates the situation, and ultimately decides to grant Hyunsu a grace period of exactly 1 year. However, he warns him that the second the year ends, he will, sell the property to the first buyer who comes along. Warmly thanking him, Hyunsu says goodbye, while King tells him that he will be waiting for his call. And so the story continues, full of challenges and twists. Back in the present, our protagonist Hyunsu finds himself articulating that, despite being the one who made that crazy offer, deep down he knew he was asking for something completely impossible. Hyunsu explains, in a somewhat casual manner, that the 1-year deadline was just a very precise estimate, and that the chance to sell that property could have ended at any moment. But look, Kang had already kept his promise. The boy can't contain his curiosity and asks why Kang was so nice to him. Kang, with a smile on his face, replies that Hyunsu was the first person to request to buy back a property after having sold it. It was something in common, and he thought that was really cool. He adds that deep down, he just wanted to encourage someone who was struggling, like a little moral boost. Hyunsu, grateful, thanks King once again and thinks to himself that, thanks to the crazy guy, he didn't have to throw in the towel and give up on the workshop. He feels he needs to give back in some way. With his mind buzzing with ideas, Rios asks if Kang has ever heard of a game called Alias. Kang, with a grin on his face, replies that, of course, he doesn't know that famous game these days. And that's when the revelation comes. Hyunsu shares that he is actually a blacksmith within the game. Ares, all excited, comments that this is the perfect springboard for him, like a combination of skills. With a sparkle in his eyes, Hyunsu offers to make an artifact as a gift. Kong lets out a shout of joy and asks if he can make a custom piece, not caring about the type or level of effect. Ryunsu smiles and says clearly, promising he will make anything Kong desires. Soon after, Ryunsu enters a tavern and is greeted by Belle, who calls him to sit beside her. This is the first time they have met since the chaos with the undead, and the tension is palpable. Belle, with a somewhat angry expression, complains about how difficult it was to find him, and almost apologizing, justifies herself, but admits she was just joking. She then introduces herself properly, explaining that she is the chief strategist of the Golden Shield Guild, and was responsible for transforming the guild into the powerhouse it is today. She adds that, on that day, she became convinced of one thing: Ryunsu would one day be one of the most notable players in the game. Therefore, she decides to be direct and states that when he creates his own guild, she wants to be the first to sign up. Ryunsu, with that gleam in his eye, teases her, reminding her that she called him a con artist. Without wasting any time, he quickly apologizes, stating that anyone would have been confused in that situation. Ryunsu smiles and says he was just joking and that he can't wait to work with her. They shake hands firmly, but before moving forward with this new partnership, Ryunsu decides it's time to share his plans. Belle, upon hearing that Ryunsu is going to meet with the Sword King Barad, one of the legends of the game, is completely shocked. Ryunsu confirms that he will participate in the Joyar martial arts tournament and questions if the winner will receive the prize from Barad himself. He confirms this, but her concern is clear, as this tournament is a true showcase of rising stars from various places and is not easy at all. Ryunsu simply replies that exactly for that reason, he needs to win, raising the stakes. Belle is perplexed, wondering how he can say this so calmly, and if he can even enjoy the food he is eating. A calm whisper telling him not to worry, that he will aim high, relying on his specialty, leaving her speechless. And finally, the day of the Juarte martial arts tournament arrives, as if fate has sealed the date. The tournament head welcomes the outsiders with an air of anticipation. Our guy, the tournament head Bakel, announces that the tournament will begin the moment he leaves the stage. And then, folks, the excitement is at a peak, because soon everyone will face real monsters. He also emphasizes that even though they cannot see His Majesty, King Barad is watching them, so they better behave like true warriors, wishing good luck to the crowd. A system window appears out of nowhere announcing the grand opening of the tournament. Suddenly, the ground begins to tremble, as if dancing. A gigantic golem emerges, and the system quickly alerts that the first mission is to survive the attack from this monster. The participants dash into battle enthusiastically, not expecting a golem to be the first challenge of the competition. Then, a system window opens. First tournament test. Whoever kills the level 109 stone golem will receive an epic reward. What a madness. One of the participants raises his eyebrows, surprised by the high level of the golem, questioning if the creature has always been this powerful, while thinking that the first round should be a piece of cake. Soon, another unaware participant charges in shouting, "First come, first served," but is instantly crushed by the golem, and that was it. Definitely a forced logout. The other competitors scream in panic and try to dodge the attacks, but fall one by one like dominoes, being disconnected from the game. The atmosphere also changes, and the participants realize that the situation is completely different from what they thought. The doubt lingers in the air. How to defeat this colossal creature? A South observes everything from afar, while the other players curse their bad luck, realizing that they have actually been tricked in a rather cruel way. In a corner, the tournament head, Bakel, has a moment of epiphany as he notices that the tournament has turned into a real disaster zone. A high-level stone golem accidentally entered the scene. With desperation running high, Bakel fears that, given the situation, all participants will be eliminated and decides he needs to see the king immediately. He runs to the king's camera, calling for King Barad and already insisting that they have to stop the tournament because the situation is critical. But King Barad remains calm and simply rejects Bakel's request, leaving him in utter confusion. The king then asks if Bakel still hasn't understood the gravity of the situation and tells him to take a closer look at that warrior in the arena. At that moment, Ryo Sul prepares a glowing arrow that hits the stone golem squarely. It is revealed that this is one of Ryo Sul's custom creations, the Orichalcum Fletching Arrow, a mythical arrow that returns to the user after being shot. What a crazy resource. The other players are left speechless and wonder how the arrow can come back like a boomerang. What kind of magic is this, man? Ryo Sul, in his turn, thinks that this arrow is a reward he received from the castle region and that it is surreal that it was made from the legendary Orichalcum. Performing as he expected, he shoots the arrow again, hitting the golem once more. When the arrow returns, it almost hits another player, who immediately yells at Ryosul to be careful unless his intention is to take him out. Ryosul, realizing the blunder, apologizes right away. With the hit, the stone golem is stunned for a long 4 seconds, a golden opportunity. The players take advantage of it and shout that the golem is stunned. This is their chance to attack and show what they can do. They launch a full assault, but the golem, at an impressive speed, recovers and retaliates with an area attack, tossing the crowd away. The situation worsens when the golem locks onto Ryosul and charges in his direction as if it were on a mission. The guy is definitely in trouble, one player screams, while another warns that they just need to hold on a bit longer and it will all be over. The players are in the fight, enduring most of the attacks while desperately trying to stay alive. At the last moment, Hyunsu decides to swap his weapon for his powerful daylight sword, letting out a cry that it's not over yet. He manages to block the massive blow from the golem, but the brutal force of the impact throws him to the ground, literally a horrendous hit. Meanwhile, back at the castle, Bakel is in a frenzy, begging King Barad to stop the tournament immediately, as the participant seems to have reached his absolute limit. The king, with a curious expression, watches the scene and suddenly something completely unexpected happens in the arena, catching his attention. Despite being on the ground, Ryosul makes use once again of the emergency god creation skill, standing up like a true warrior. The creation process advances and finally, the audio of Damascus emerges, a weapon specially designed to cut stone with a single devastating blow. Sul manages to defeat the stone golem with such ease that it leaves everyone speechless. As the battle ends, the Damascus Valdo disappears, as it was an emergency creation. While Ryosul is bombarded by a flood of level-up notifications, he feels absolutely overwhelmed to realize everything happening around him. He excitedly discovers that his level has increased by 14, a true record. The other players watch in disbelief, wondering on which planet he managed to defeat that monster. Confused, Hyunsu asks him if they shouldn't have really defeated the golem, since the situation was critical. The players explain that the mission was to survive, and how could they defeat a creature with such an absurd level? They recount that the trial is divided into 3 stages, and the appearance of this golem had already thrown everything into chaos. Clearly, it was not there to be defeated by anyone. Now, Hyunsu finally understands the gravity of the situation he is in. Suddenly, he feels an extreme dizziness and ends up losing consciousness, as if he had taken a little spin in the park. The other players quickly gather around him, asking if he fainted, and notice that he was not disconnected. They start discussing how many weapons he initially used, thinking he was multi-skilled, but then realize he is a true master of weapons. At that moment, everyone wishes they had at least one of his incredible weapons. Just then, Bakel enters the scene, announcing to all participants that due to an organizer error, the martial arts tournament will be suspended and orders everyone to leave the venue. The news of Ryosul's incredible achievement spreads like wildfire, with thousands of spectators watching a live stream of him unconscious in the arena. The viewers are ecstatic, wondering how he managed to bring down the stone golem alone and clamoring for more information about his bow and arrow. Someone notices that Ryosul has dropped his arrow, and by zooming in on the image, they can see the name Ryum engraved on it. Immediately, the spectators connect him to the Ryum who created the famous irreparable bell in the castle region, leaving them completely stunned. They are amazed by the strength of a blacksmith and the superior quality of his gear. The offices of Beholder Company, the customer service team, are bombarded with a flood of questions about the tournament suspension. The team is in a real bind, unable to provide clear answers, only stating that it was a decision made by Ares' free will or that it is an internal issue in the kingdom of Joyar, repeatedly apologizing. In the development department, a colleague contacts their team leader and warns about a major problem that is on the way. He hurriedly responds that he is busy, as if he hasn't seen the gravity of the situation. The character informs him that the Joyard martial arts tournament has been suspended, and with an air of someone who was already expecting this, he simply responds indifferently that he knew this would happen. His colleagues are terrified, and one of them shouts that this wasn't the biggest problem. The real issue was that King Barad had summoned the user Ryan Su. The team leader is in shock, wondering how they could meet so quickly when the tournament plan still required a lot of bureaucracy. The colleague confirms that Ryan Su is already on his way to the reception hall, putting everyone on high alert. Then the team leader realizes that the situation is dropping like a bomb. He is in trouble and will have to work all night again. He comments with a desperate expression that this user defies any logic and his actions are always a box of surprises. Meanwhile, he wonders aloud what will happen if Ryan Su actually succeeds in Brode's mission and if his affinity reaches the maximum. He concludes that if that happens, our boy will master the art of the sword, the king's fencing, and become the fiercest blacksmith of all time. The development team leader adds that it will be a thorny path, as the decision depends on Barad's free will. The colleague expresses, somewhat intuitively, that Ryan Su will succeed, which makes the team leader very worried, and he asks her not to let out such sinister ideas. The next day in the game, Ryan Su is escorted to the throne room, thinking that he would meet Barad faster than expected. Ryan Su kneels respectfully before King Barad, who calls him a stranger with a disdainful air. Barad explains that normally the prize would have been presented in front of everyone, but he asks the boy's understanding to simplify things due to an unexpected incident. He then reveals that everyone will recognize Ryan Su's remarkable performance as a weapons master the day before, and then the king makes an offer to Ryan Su, a cash prize of 13,000 gold pieces. But suddenly, in his face, he stands up and interrupts the king, saying that he heard what they were looking for. The king's guards are out of their minds with his insolence, believing that such arrogance cannot be tolerated, especially from such a rare warrior. They wonder how the madman dares to speak while his majesty has not yet finished. But Ryan Su casually responds, introducing himself as Yoon, the blacksmith. This infuriates the guards even more, ready to forcibly remove him, but King Barad quickly commands them to stop. Confirming that Yoon is indeed the guest he was expecting, Ryun then formally greets His Majesty, King Barad, one of the 10 legends of Ares, and makes sure to mention that he is late. He explains that the journey to get there was complicated, worthy of an epic adventure. Barad asks if Ryun knows the reason for his summoning. With the confidence of a true blacksmith, Ryun responds that it is to commission him to forge a sword, which the king confirms with a nod. Barad explains that even the best blacksmith in the kingdom, and even Day, the master of the tower and sword, have not been able to accomplish this task, which is why he wants to know what makes Ryun someone he can trust with this responsibility. Under the pressure of the king's gaze, Ryun asserts that he has only one thing to offer. He came here fully believing in his own ability. King Barad lets out a loud laugh, impressed by the boldness of the unknown. The king then decides to bet on Ryun's confidence and orders his men to bring forth what he has prepared. A shining chest is presented before Ryun, who can barely contain his excitement. The chest contains 100-year-old cold iron, a special ore that, like a well-chilled drink, has absorbed the cold for so long and possesses fire resistance and ice properties. The outcome would be delightful. What a crazy situation. What will Ryun do with this stuff? Ryun gazes at the metal before him, completely astonished, thinking that it looked like something straight out of one of those epic martial arts novels. Barad, with his serious demeanor, specifies his request. He wants an epic-grade sword or higher, one that emanates an intense cold as if ice itself were embodied. Barad promises that if he is satisfied, he will grant Ryun any wish he desires, but he does not forget to emphasize that if there is disappointment, our protagonist will never step foot in the Jewel Kingdom again. At that moment, a mission window appears in the game titled The King's Commission, which requires the king's recognition as if it were a VIP invitation. The reward is the fulfillment of a request from Barad, and the penalty for failure is simply being expelled from the Jewel Kingdom. As if that were nothing, with a spirit only he has, Ryun accepts the mission, promising that he will not disappoint the king and that he will definitely nail this. Later, in the blacksmith's workshop, Ryun feels a burning sensation on his neck, as if he were being scorched by the intense gaze of a woman directed at him. He turns around and comes face to face with Bella, the vice captain of the Knights of the Jewel Kingdom. What detail has a level that is 301? And Asul thinks to himself that, even being a complete stranger, having a guard so close to him seems a bit excessive, but he soon dismisses that thought, recognizing that it's logical not to trust someone new like him easily. Bela tells him to ignore her presence and focus on his work, as if that were easy with her hypnotizing gaze and sarcastic smile. And Asul asks if his fixed stare is really that obvious, and she straightforwardly replies, "Yes, honesty is everything." Bela, on the other hand, ponders to herself, questioning who that young man thinks he is. She remembers that His Highness has staked his last chance on him and vows that he cannot fail because the pressure is insane. And of course, Asul feels all the pressure that Bela is putting on him. The situation is tense. Then, suddenly, a beeping sound cuts through the attention in the game's atmosphere, leaving Asul confused. What craziness. He apologizes to Bela, explaining that something must have happened in his real world, and asks if she minds if he steps out for a moment. Asul wakes up in his capsule in the real world and is about to open the door, but it seems that what's coming is not fun at all. He is surprised to see the building manager there, right at the door. What could her plot be? Asul asks her what brought her there, curious and already imagining that something is wrong. The lady explains that she has decided to sell the house, and soon after, a drama begins. Recently, he has been unemployed and needs to sort things out, which only worsens the situation. She apologizes to him, but Yunsu, with a good heart, says it's no problem, genuinely feeling that he should apologize for renting the place at such a friendly price. He asks when he needs to leave, and she replies that it will be in 2 weeks. Time for a marathon of stress. The lady feels embarrassed in front of him, but he insists that she shouldn't feel that way, assuring her that he has lived well there and bowing respectfully to her. After she leaves, Ryo-sul repeats the deadline to himself, emphasizing 2 weeks like a countdown. Exhausted, he reflects that even having made a good sum in Aries, his father's hospital bills cost a fortune, and recovering the burnt workshop means 330 million. And on top of that, he hasn't even started his own burn treatments. The situation is tense. In a moment of despair, he wonders where he should go now. What could be his new adventure? At that instant, the phone rings. The caller is King Ruan. Perhaps it's the answer he has been waiting for when he answers. He starts unloading his nonsense right away, asking what he's doing and asserting that he has a brilliant idea about the mission. That's why he decided to call Ryo-sul, in a rather impatient vibe, asking her to call back later and explaining that, at the moment, his head is full of things. Bell, with that worried tone, asks if something is bothering him. Ryo-sul responds that Barade's mission is super important, and suddenly informs that he needs to leave home in just 2 weeks. Bell, already arguing, reminds him of the crucial importance of this mission and says she expects 2 very clear results from this endeavor. She explains that at this very moment, the folks are paying attention, discussing whether the champion of the Joyard martial arts tournament and the blacksmith Ryum are the same person. She gives a hint. It's better if he doesn't clarify this now, because when he reveals his path later, it's going to be a true horror. Bell adds that he has received a commission to forge a sword for Barade, one of the most influential NPCs in Aries. She asks him to imagine Barad revealing a new sword engraved with the name Ryum to her. That's the moment when his value is going to skyrocket, and that's why she's always said she would stand by him. Ryo-sul thanks Bell, saying that she brought him back to reality and promises that he won't embarrass himself and will do his best. Ryo-sul returns to the game and runs into Bella, who is freaking out and shouting at him, filled with rage. She screams in his face, asking how he can only be back now, and he, confused, doesn't understand what happened. Bela reveals that His Royal Highness, Barade, has been captured in the dragon's lair. Ryun, in shock, asks where King Barade is imprisoned. He insists, asking for the exact location of the dragon's lair. Bela, finding it even funny, questions how he could be so shocked, since he didn't even know where it was. Ryo-sul tries to justify himself, saying he thought he should at least act as if he were surprised with time passing and the pressure mounting. Bela begins to explain. She said that the dragon's lair usually refers to regions with fire-type monsters. Among these areas, Fritz's dungeon stands out as a cursed place from which no one has ever returned alive, except for His Majesty, King Barade. Ryo-sul is intrigued and questions why the king would enter a dungeon he had already visited, especially without the weapon he had ordered. Bela then pulls the card from her sleeve and explains that His Majesty's target for vengeance was inside that dungeon. The words "target for vengeance" catch Ryo-sul completely off guard. At this moment, the scene shifts to the fiery lair. King Barad is before the blazing gate of the dungeon, clearly injured and exhausted. He knows that crossing that line will initiate a true battlefield. Even his current sword, he believes, will not be up to the task. Relieved that his men managed to escape safely, Barad reflects on the 3 days it will take for reinforcements to arrive. A bitter smile forms as he admits to himself that he might have to wait for the stranger to complete the sword. A painful memory resurfaces, shrouded in sadness. Barad remembers his son Ban, who would be about the same age as Ryunso. Memory of Ban's last moments comes to him with painful clarity. Ban had died in his arms, calling for his father. Barad, furious, wanted to know why Ban had come without even saying hello first. Ban, somewhat embarrassed, quickly explained that he thought conquering the dungeon would be the perfect move to become the son his father always dreamed of, but realizing he didn't have nearly the necessary strength, he ended up apologizing. Desperate, Barad begged Ban to hold on to life, but he apologized again before taking his last breath. Still impacted by that intense scene, Barad realized he should have waited for the sword, but letting the Ifrit escape was unimaginable. He had waited years for that opportunity to arise. Setting aside his emotions, he decided to move forward toward the flaming gate. Meanwhile, in the workshop, Bella continued her explanation since the tragedy that led to the prince's death. Her Majesty was trying by all means to capture the Ifrit, but the creature always managed to find a way to escape. As Bella said, this could be the king's last chance. Despite her doubts about trusting a stranger like Ryunso, she knew there was a reason Her Majesty entrusted him with this mission. Bowing, she gave a knightly reverence worthy of the kingdom of Yoar and pleaded with King Sul to find a way to save the king. An emergency mission arose out of nowhere, to forge a sword that could save the king. The goal was to create a blade powerful enough to rescue King Barad. If all went well, Bella would gain a boost in confidence from Her Majesty, but if it failed, the penalty would be Barad's death. Ryosul began to ponder the possibility of losing the king. He recalled a day when he almost lost everything to the flames. One question kept hammering in his mind. If his family had lost their lives that day, would he have been able to move on like Barad? With determination at its peak, he vowed to do everything within his power. Returning to the Aang task at hand, Riansu threw himself into the work with full intensity, sparks flying everywhere. As he hammered the cold iron, he soon plunged it into the water and remembered that the heat of the Ifrit was so powerful that it could melt even single-rank weapons. So, to have any chance, the new weapon needed to be even stronger. His thoughts focused on the intransigent complexity of the frozen ore. As his concentration heightened, a system window appeared, indicating that his 100-year skill with cold iron was evolving. A new notification emerged. The spirit of the blacksmith was activated. The system warned that Ryanso had immersed himself in the deepest work of any. Passion, determination, and empathy placed him in a state of absolute focus. The announcement echoed through the forge. Ryanso had forged his first legendary-grade sword. From within the workshop, a bright light broke through like an eclipse. Sensing the intensity of the moment, Bella wondered if the sword was finally complete. Ryonsu stood tall with his newly forged blade, shining in his hand as if it were a sacred artifact. With a determination that bordered on inspiring, the protagonist Ryonsu declared it was time to save His Majesty, King Barad. Inside the nest of flames, Barad screamed in pain, crumbling after a devastating blow that struck him. Even though he was injured, our hero rose to his knees, refusing to succumb to that grim fate. Before him stood the fearsome leader of the nest of flames, Ifrit, boasting an impressive level of 409. Immediately, King Barad decided not to wait any longer and leaped forward, determined to change the tide of battle. "I've waited too long for this moment," he exclaimed, reflecting his frustration and thirst for justice. In that instant, he charged his sword with a powerful aura, filled with determination, and managed to deliver a cut. Instantly, the blade sliced through the air with a dark fury. However, it seemed the attack had no effect, as Ifrit, true to its tank nature, simply regenerated its body as if nothing had happened. Ifrit then turned and attempted a sneaky attack from the ground, but fortunately, Barad jumped just in time, dodging the fiery ambush. As he pulled away, Ifrit's voracious flames began to engulf King Barad's sword, transforming into a fatal tornado attack that melted his only weapon. Enraged, Yiffy launched a series of attacks against King Barad, yet he dodged with astonishing agility. All this turmoil only made Yiffy more furious, and he unleashed a vast fiery attack that trapped Barad in swarms, unable to get up. Ray Barad began to curse, aware that imminent danger surrounded him. Ifrit raised his weapon, preparing to deliver the final blow, hurling a flaming spear towards Ray Barad. But at that dramatic moment, a gigantic sword of ice emerged from nowhere, intercepting the deadly attack. It was Ryansu and Bella who arrived just in time to change the course of that battle. Bella, in a scream of despair, urged Barad to use the new sword he had received and seized the shining blade that was thrown before him as if it were a gift from the gods. A system window then appeared, displaying incredible details about the sword. It was the custom creation of Reino Sul, full of impressive powers like 343% resistance to fire, 194% ice attack power, and a phenomenal increase of 397% in ice attack power against fire monsters. And to top this marvel off, the weapon possessed an active skill known as Ice Flower. Rio Sul urgently pleaded with the king to use the sword, knowing that this was the chance. Barad held the sword firmly as an icy power enveloped him, pulsating with life. He activated the Ice Flower skill, unleashing a powerful wave of cold that swept across the battlefield. The freezing wave met the flaming charge, and Ifrit screamed in agony as the cold devoured his flames, as if the battle were deciding their fate. Charging bravely forward, Barad delivered a blow so devastating that it cut Ifrit's body in half. The system then announced that the boss monster had been defeated, echoing relief all around. A brief moment of relief washed over Barad. He believed that victory had finally been achieved. But suddenly, Ifrit's body glowed ominously, swelling with unexpected destructive energy. Surprised, Rio loudly asked what was happening, with evident concern. Bela, realizing what was coming, recognized the danger. Some monsters self-destruct upon death, and this seemed to be the case. In an explosive moment, the entire dungeon was engulfed in enormous flames, creating a scene of pure destruction. Bela, her voice filled with dread, shouted for him to escape, warning about the imminent danger. But, in the stance of a king who would not yield, the king commanded her to stay back, calling it a true royal command. He accepted his fate, his eyes fixed on the medallion that held the picture of his son, as if that image were a reminder of a past he could not escape. Meanwhile, dark thoughts invaded his mind. It was time to end it all. Bella's heart plunged into an abyss of despair. She knew she needed to save her king, but his command shackled her like an invisible chain, conflicted between duty and love. She stood paralyzed, unable to move. Then, Rios advanced as if he had decided that the situation could not continue like this. With unwavering determination, he declared that he would go in her place, ready to face the flames. Using the emergency power of the gods, he forged a fire-resistant shield and, in an act of bravery, threw himself into the flames. As he walked through the fiery chaos, he called for King Barad like a savior amid despair. King Jaisaus demanded that he leave, claiming he had already done more than enough. But Ryunsu's stubbornness was firm. Ryunsu refused, insisting that he had come to accompany him and would not leave him behind like a true friend. Ryunsu's eyes fell on the medallion, a testament to the emotional weight of the situation. He asked if the king's decision was influenced by the pain contained in that small object. The question hung in the air. Barad, with tears in his eyes, confessed the truth. Because of him, his son had perished, a burden that tormented him. Ryunsu, compassionately, inquired if the king truly believed his son would want to see him in this state. This made Barad furious, and he grabbed Ryunsu by the collar, seeming to be at breaking point, warning him that he would not dare discuss something as profound as the pain of losing a child. Barad cried, claiming that no one could understand this pain. And while he understood the intensity of the pain, Ryunsu whispered that he too had faced his own despair. His father was in a coma, and every day he fervently prayed for his recovery. Though his prayers had not yet been answered, he found peace in the fact that his father was still alive. With silent firmness, Ryunsu told Barad that surely his son would wish for the same, that he continued to live. Tears began to fill Barad's eyes as Ryunsu urged him to let his son rest in peace, freeing himself from the weight on his mind. He saw Ban smiling, choked by the emotion flooding his heart. Barad, with a trembling voice, repeatedly apologized, admitting his own folly in being overwhelmed by grief. Ryunsu, with an encouraging look, whispered that he needed to keep living, that he should strive to be the kind of father his son could be proud of. In the end, Barad nodded, agreeing that he could not remain a shameful father, determined to change. As Ryunsu carried King Barad, together they managed to escape the flames. Like true warriors. Bella, upon seeing them, ran toward them, crying in relief and asking if His Majesty was safe. Rinso reassured her, stating that Barad was fine, but quickly added that he would need to stay out for a while. At that moment, a system message appeared, announcing that his health points had dropped to 0 and that he would be forcefully disconnected, as if reality was pulling him back. Before disappearing, the protagonist made sure to comfort her, reminding her that, deep down, players didn't actually die during this game. As Barad collapsed in her arms, whispering that it was the boy who saved him, she screamed his name, trying desperately to keep him conscious. But unfortunately, Barad slipped into unconsciousness, leaving a faint smile on his face, as if he were at peace with the situation. Waking up in the real world, Yunsu experienced that shocking jolt of reality. Soon, a system notification appeared, informing him that due to the legal penalty, his disguise level had decreased by 1. What a trip.